Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Cleaning his knife and sword again wasn't strictly necessary, but the repetitive and familiar actions required for this task offered Harry some comfort. At this moment in time, that was as good a reason as any for Harry to be sitting doing nothing but that. After his shower, he didn't really feel like facing anyone else at the moment. He was currently holed up in his room, but was surprised when his self-enforced solitude was broken by the Ravenclaw house ghost. The Grey Lady passed through his closed door to speak with the young Ravenclaw. The Quirrell problem has been dealt with by the senior staff. Yeah, just a pity they weren't in time to deal with the troll problem in the infirmary. You did very well today, young champion. Your father will be proud of you. This was scant comfort to the hurting young lad. He might be the only one. The headmaster certainly wasn't too happy with me. You should come down to dinner, see your friends. Harry gave that idea a resounding no. I think I'll just stay in my room. My father is coming to Hogwarts tomorrow. I can't wait to see him. Seeing the boy was struggling with the consequences of his actions today, his house ghost made a suggestion. Hogwarts can ensure you're not disturbed, if you wish. He had a faint smile on his face at that suggestion. Yes, I would like that. As the ghost left, a tray of food appeared on the bed beside him. Hogwarts would look after her champion. The senior staff were all in Dumbledore's office. There was a half-empty bottle of fire whiskey on the headmaster's desk. The bottle would take even more of a hammering before their meeting was finished. Minerva repeated the question that had three heads of house hitting the fiery liquid. How can Voldemort not be dead? Even the death of poor Quirinus didn't finish him off. We all saw that spirit escape. Pomona, though, was looking at the incident from an entirely different angle. I find it very hard to believe that Albus just happened to mention he was going to be removing the item from the third floor this weekend, and we were all fighting a possessed professor the very next day. Was that why the stone was brought here in the first place, as a trap for the Dark Lord? Felius didn't like the further implications behind Pomona's conjecture. I have trouble believing it could be mere coincidence that this all happened the year Mr. Crow came to Hogwarts. You could practically see the wheels turning inside the little professor's head as he replayed the other disturbing information that had recently been revealed. The conclusions he was coming to were scaring the head of Ravenclaw. He rounded on Dumbledore. You knew Voldemort wasn't gone and decided not to tell anyone, didn't you? I'm willing to bet the goblins discovered this, and that's why you were barred from Gringotts. These assumptions also led Pomona to draw her own terrible conclusions. Child of prophecy, Hogwarts champion, and now slayer of trolls. I'm also willing to bet the prophecy concerns the child and Voldemort, and Albus Dumbledore knows all about it. Minerva had no problem following her two friends' train of thought. She also didn't like where that train was heading, nor was the head of Gryffindor shy about taking her complaints to the conductor. If I discover you were in any way responsible for that troll incident today, I will take my findings straight to the Board of Governors. Children's lives were put at severe risk with that creature loose in the castle. Filius had more to say. In light of our suspicions, I demand to be at that meeting with Barchoke tomorrow. I am Mr. Crow's head of house, and intend to see his best interests protected while Harry's at Hogwarts. This was one bandwagon Minerva definitely wanted to join. I demand to be there too. If Voldemort returns and young Harry is involved, it will undoubtedly affect the entire school. You have lost the trust of your heads of house. We no longer believe that you can be relied upon to fulfill your obligations as a headmaster should. Pomona was in wholehearted agreement with those sentiments. This doesn't just affect a specific house. Those pupils in the infirmary could have been from any of the four. Poppy is a renowned healer but would be the first to admit she was out of her depth today. Young Mr. Crow literally saved their lives, and all you could do was attempt to reprimand the lad. The head of Hufflepuff's disgust at Dumbledore was there for all to hear, her inbred sense of loyalty well and truly offended. I saw Hogwarts respond instantly to his call for assistance. I feel she will also take action against any attempts made to circumvent her champion. I can't help but think Harry being there today, clearly possessing the appropriate training and tools, has further endeared Hogwarts to her chosen champion. You could find yourself out a job, headmaster. She gave this a few seconds to sink in before making her own demands. I also intend to be at this meeting. I want to hear what the lad's father has to say about this. Minerva remembered what had taken place during her lesson earlier. There may be more of us looking for a job than you think, Pomona. Mr. Crow claimed that transfiguration was the easiest form of magic to master, requiring only one spell, and then proceeded to prove it. He turned a book into a chicken with no recognized wand movement or spell incantation. Snape had been quiet the entire meeting, but couldn't hold back at this. His reply was dripping with contempt. You've obviously been pranked. No first year could do that. The book would have been pre-spelled to transfigure on command. The Hogwarts deputy was in no mood to mollycoddle anyone's feelings and ripped right into the potions, Professor. I am well aware of how that prank works, Severus, which is why I gave him a book that belonged to me and determined the item I wanted the lad to transfigure it into. He also further transfigured the chicken into a woven basket, and finally a kitten, all by the same method. Albus seized at this opportunity to turn the subject away from his relentless verbal castigation. And just how did Mr. Crow accomplish this feat? Surely not by wandless magic. He used his knife. Minerva had to hold her hand up to prevent the interruptions that she could see coming from Albus and Severus. The lad knew the ministry interpretation of what constituted a wand verbatim. Is there anyone here who doesn't believe Mr. Crow's knife will not break any of the ministry's guidelines of just what they define a wand as? When you take into account that his knife was a personal gift from Ragnarok, then you can guarantee it will fall outside ministerial law. Snape couldn't stand the son of his former school days enemy receiving praise. If he's so bloody good at magic, why did he have to kill a troll with a sword? I would have expected him to tie it up in pink ribbons and bows, just waiting on us coming to collect it. And just how many 11-year-olds do you know who could take down a fully grown mountain troll? Phileas wasn't for letting Snape or Dumbledore off with anything. Can I assume from your attitude that you don't want to be part of this meeting tomorrow? The brat has made it perfectly clear that he wants nothing to do with me. Well, the feeling is mutual. No, I will not be at that meeting. Excuse me, but the thought of listening to more talk about that boy is making me quite nauseous. I shall retire for the night. As Snape was leaving, Phileas had a parting comment for the potions professor. I think the problem is young Harry made it publicly clear he wanted nothing to do with you. Just remember that, Severus. Harry has already proven my earlier statement correct. Never mess with a goblin. As Snape left, Minerva once more turned the argument back to Dumbledore. So, Headmaster, are you going to tell us this prophecy, or are we going to have to ask a goblin about it tomorrow? Albus could only stall his senior staff and hope the goblin would tell them nothing tomorrow. He was beginning to regret arranging that meeting. The timing of it just couldn't be worse. Harry came down the stairs with the intention of carrying out his normal morning exercise routine. He found an unexpected sight waiting on him. Hermione had fallen asleep on a chair turned to face his staircase, obviously intent on not letting him get past her. It should also have been obvious from her attire what the young witch's intentions were. But Harry had never seen clothing like this. The shorts came down to just above her knees and clung to Hermione like a blue and pink second skin. The short-sleeved top was of the same colorful design and material, clinging to her every curve while exposing part of her midriff. Chunky footwear completed the ensemble, all made of something called Nike, and she had even attempted to tie her hair back into a ponytail. Hermione's mane could never be tamed by a mere hair tie and was already escaping to cover her face. Harry gently moved the escaped locks away from her eyes, only for those expressive hazel orbs to shoot open. Harry would later swear he didn't see Hermione move, but she must have. How else could she now be standing and wrapped all around him? Oh, Harry, you've no idea how happy I am to see you're all right. You walked out the infirmary covered in blood and I was sure some of it must be yours. Madame Pomfrey had to practically force-feed me a calming draught to stop me chasing after you. She said we were all suffering from shock and kept us in her apartment while the infirmary was being repaired and fumigated. She let us out at dinner time and then I couldn't find you anywhere. No one could. Where were you? Harry had thought he had lost his friends, but if the way Hermione was clinging to him was any indication, that was clearly not the case. I was in my room. I thought you wouldn't want to be my friend after what I did yesterday. Hermione took his face in her hands, ensuring he could look into her eyes as she answered that question. What you did yesterday was the bravest thing I've ever seen. We were all terrified, yet you took command of the situation. I saw and heard you try to get the troll away from us. It didn't leave you any other option. You looked as if you would never want to see me again, as if I frightened you. You scared the bloody life out of me. I thought that troll was sure to kill you. The smell in the infirmary was atrocious. There was blood splattered everywhere, and Padma was actually shooting slugs from her mouth as she screamed. Not one of life's better experiences. A shiver ran down Hermione just thinking about it. Harry must have felt it because he held her tighter, giving the young witch the courage to say the next bit. I actually couldn't believe we all survived and just stood there in shock. It wasn't until Madame Pomfrey began to treat us I realized you had left. I'm sorry if you thought that, Harry. I can assure you nothing could be further from the truth. So Padma and her sister don't hate me? This had Hermione blushing and really piqued Harry's curiosity. He held the silence until she eventually answered his question. The twins seem to think they now owe you a life debt. Parvati saw both of them marrying you as the perfect way to repay this debt. Harry struggled to hold his laughter as he pushed for more. I saved you as well. What does Hermione Granger think of this idea? Oh, Parvati had thought of that as well. I was to marry you too, and become part of your harem. Harry couldn't hold his laughter any longer, much to the consternation of Miss Granger. I hardly see how that is funny, Harry. Oh, you would, if you knew more about goblins. Harry regained control of his laughter before giving Hermione the information she was missing. Goblins have one mate, and that mate is for life. No goblin would ever take part in a multiple relationship like she's suggesting. I would really appreciate it if my best friend made sure certain others got to hear about that fact. For some reason this put a wide smile on Hermione's face. Harry reckoned that now would be a good time to ask what was on his mind. Hermione, what are you wearing? The pink tinge had once more returned to her features. Oh, this is my mother's idea of exercise clothes. I had hoped for jogging bottoms and a hoodie, a tracksuit even. Mother has to go and buy spandex, so it was this or robes. Shall I go and change? No, those are great. They won't restrict your movement in the slightest. What Harry didn't say was holding her dressed like that felt really different, but in a good way. This gave Hermione the opening she was looking for. Okay, so we know I'm wearing spandex, but I've never seen anything like you've got on. What is it? You never want to see this either. My tunic is made from the hide of a Hebridean black, one of the few species of dragon native to Britain. Hermione was running her hands over his chest without realizing quite what she was doing. This is dragon skin? It feels soft, yet tough at the same time. Yes. Well, it provides protection against spells or blades. Harry was almost stuttering before pulling himself together. Do you want to do some training? I think we should just start with a light run this morning. This was quickly agreed upon, and they left the common room, Hermione once more on Harry's arm. Padma found Hermione sitting on the stairs and had to help the clearly exhausted witch reach her room. What happened to you? Oh, I went training with Harry. His idea of a light workout was a 3-mile run. My legs gave out halfway up the stairs. I really need to shower and get ready, but I don't think I can. Padma had an idea how to get her friend moving. That's too bad. Parvati will have the story of what happened yesterday all over the castle by now. My sister is quite taken with your best friend. She'll probably be sitting on Harry's lap before breakfast is over. The exhausted witch suddenly found reserves she didn't know she possessed. Hermione didn't see Padma's smile as she hurried past her smirking friend for a quick shower. Hermione entered the great hall on Harry's arm as usual, but that was where usual ended. Padma hadn't been joking about her twin sister. Harry's exploits from yesterday were now known by everyone, which probably explained why everyone was now staring at them. Harry had just sat down between Hermione and Padma when they were approached by the other Patil's sister. Mr. Crow, I would like to formally acknowledge that I owe you a life debt. The rest of the Great Hall didn't even bother pretending that they weren't listening to every word. They easily heard Harry's reply. "I'm sorry, Miss Patil, but I can't accept that." Parvati was rocked on her heels at Harry's answer. It was certainly not what she expected. "Why not? There's no question that you saved my life. Actually, I rushed to the infirmary to make sure my friends were okay. You just happened to be there too. Goblins always look out for their friends and family. There can be no debts between Hermione, Padma, or I for doing so." It was a downtrodden Parvati that headed back to the Gryffindor table, fighting to hold back the tears. Harry wasn't exactly sure what he'd done, and asked Padma if she could explain it to him. "You basically told Parvati that if we weren't in the infirmary, you wouldn't have come racing to the rescue." Harry nodded at that. "If you and Hermione had been in the hall yesterday, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. I didn't go looking for the troll, I went looking for the both of you. The troll just happened to find us, and Parvati just happened to be there too. I can't accept a life debt for that. I certainly didn't mean to offend your sister though, and I'm still not sure how I did." Hermione attempted to help him understand. "Harry, you have no idea just what a heroic figure you appeared yesterday. You were decisive, calm, and the way you protected us was terrifying to watch. That troll was enormous, yet you felled it like a tree the instant it got too close. Parvati is just upset that you didn't perform your heroics to rescue her. I think I see. Padma, please tell your sister that I may have raced there to ensure you and Hermione were safe, but I would have protected anyone from that troll. Well, perhaps I would have let it beat up Malfoy or Weasley for a while before I stopped it." Padma knew it was more a case of her sister had never had to play second fiddle to her before. Hearing that Harry had raced to the infirmary to see that she was safe, after publicly clobbering the Weasley boy for hitting her with a spell in the first place, would be a shock to Parvati's system. When she put it all together like that, it was a shock to Padma's too. Seeing that the morning entertainment appeared to be over, Roger asked Harry a question that everyone wanted to know the answer to. "Harry, why did you use Gryffindor's sword on that troll?" "Oh, my knife wasn't quite big enough to bring it down. Pass those sausages over, please, Hermione." That ended all questions on the subject. No Ravenclaw could fault logic like that. As the noise level in the hall returned to what passed for normal at mealtimes, Harry had a question to ask both his friends. "My father is coming to Hogwarts today. Would you like to meet him?" Hermione and Padma both said yes at once, putting a wide smile on Harry's face. That smile just got wider as Professor Flitwick entered the Great Hall, accompanied by a goblin Harry clearly knew. No one in the hall was quite sure what to make of the boy who lived getting to his feet before respectfully bowing to a goblin. "Well met, Master Pitsley, it really is a pleasure to see you again. I had no idea who my father had arranged to tutor potions and am delighted you have made the journey here." "Well met, Harry Crow. Yes, your father asked me to use that name while you are inside Hogwarts. I was hardly likely to let some wizard ruin all the hard work I had expended on your potions tuition. Master Flitwick has kindly arranged a classroom that should meet our needs, though I understand we have a few more students wishing to learn potions properly." "Yes, Master Pitsley, 3 of my friends. Will that be acceptable?" "That will be fine. If they prove adequate, we might add a few more as the weeks progress." This proved too much for Snape, who stormed out the Great Hall. Hogwarts students being taught potions by a goblin. He would have to take some action about that. Minerva McGonagall felt she needed to take some action too. She approached the group and Felius introduced her. After the pleasantries, Minerva got right down to business, a trait that would endear her to anyone of goblin descent. "Master Pitsley, as deputy headmistress, I would like to observe you teaching our students this morning. Please understand, I mean no slight on your capabilities. Certain others might cast aspersions on you teaching at Hogwarts. I will be able to deal with them in my official capacity if I have witnessed your lesson firsthand." The goblin bowed slightly to McGonagall. "I look forward to your company, Professor, and thank you for your honesty and forethought." Neither Hermione, Padma, or Neville had a problem cutting their breakfast short, so Professor Flitwick could lead them all to the classroom set aside for their potions. After watching the way Snape had stormed out of the hall, missing lunch and dinner too would have been a small price to pay. If the longing looks they received from 3/4 of the other first years were any indication, they clearly thought so too. Minerva sat at the back of the class, not sure what to expect. If Harry's transfiguration tuition was any indicator, then she needed to be ready for anything. What she didn't expect was the children being told to put their books away before being handed a different one from their new professor. Pitsley was kind enough to hand her a copy too. Now I feel we must lay a few ground rules down here before we start. Give you some idea of what to expect from me as your teacher. First of all, I intend to be finished the first year course before your next holiday. Pitsley let that statement sink in before continuing. I intend to achieve this by not wasting both our times continually brewing different potions, just so you learn one specific procedure or technique. When I teach you something, I expect you to remember it first time. Harry had heard all of this before but enjoyed watching his friends nod in agreement with that last statement. Secondly, I won't be issuing what would properly be called homework. I don't care if you can write me a 3-foot essay on how you would brew something. I would much rather we spent our time ensuring you can actually brew that specific potion. The boys and girls is what I class as homework. Each week, I will tell you the potion that you are going to be brewing the next time you see me. Your task then is to research all the steps, procedures, and ingredients to the stage where you can brew it perfectly. The books I've just given you should be extremely helpful with each task. Minerva thought the goblin teacher's expectations were too high, until she opened the book Pitsley had given her. That the potion formula and brewing procedure were clearly laid out was to be expected. What she'd never seen before was the wealth of additional information provided in a reference section that was easily 2/3 of the entire book. Pitsley took them through just what he expected, clearly showing each student how to glean the information on every ingredient and why they must follow the steps exactly. The goblin demonstrated each step of the procedure, actually brewing the potion himself. He encouraged them to ask questions, but instead of answering them, preferred to lead them whenever possible through the book, so they could discover the correct answer for themselves. Hermione, though, had a question that required a direct answer. "Sir, why is Harry's book so much thicker than ours? Mr. Crow already has a few years of my tuition under his belt, hence will be working on a different potion next week. Pages are added to your books as your skills increase. If things progress as I hope, your books should all be updated before December ends. There is a high probability that our numbers will increase. At that time you three will be working on whatever potion I have assigned you, while Harry works on another. Any newcomers will of course start at the beginning. It is perfectly normal in a goblin classroom to have students working at different levels. Once you have brewed a few potions, I shall see where we go from there." The lunch bell surprised everyone, including Minerva. She hadn't intended to spend the entire lesson here, only enough time to ensure the students were being taught to the same standard as the rest of their yearmates. She found the handout to be one of the best educational textbooks she'd ever seen, and the teaching method fascinating. Minerva could see the positive implications of this. Severus was always complaining about expensive ingredients being reduced to sludge, or cauldrons melted by dunderheaded students. It would be very interesting to compare the two methods. She really only had one question. "Master Pitsley, what do you do when a student arrives at class clearly not having carried out the preparation work you set them?" The little goblin seemed affronted at that question. No student of mine would ever dare. Harry quickly covered for McGonagall's unintentional gaffe. Master Pitsley is the foremost potion brewer in Goblin society. It is such an honor to be tutored by him that his statement is of course correct. There is no way a student of his would arrive for class unprepared. Their tutoring would come to a swift end, and the disgrace of that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Hermione, Padma and Neville certainly had no intention of ever arriving unprepared. Not only would that mean letting Harry down, their only other alternative was Snape. They may not have done any brewing here today, but all now felt confident they could make the required potion next week. For Neville, that was really saying something. As they walked back to the Great Hall, McGonagall spotted another goblin standing there waiting with Phileas. The deputy headmistress also spotted something that warmed her heart. Just for a few seconds, Harry had let his mask slip, and Minerva was delighted at what she saw displayed there. Here was a young boy away from home for the first time in his life, laying eyes on a loved parent. Having observed the Dursleys all those years ago, she really couldn't imagine Harry ever having the kind of reaction to seeing his aunt and uncle. This was her first indication that Harry growing up with the goblins was a good solution to that young orphan's problem. Hermione was on Harry's arm and could literally feel the excitement course through him as he spotted the goblin who must be his father. She was practically dragged in that direction. "Well met, father. How are you today?" "All the better for seeing you, my son." Barchoke was smiling inside at the young girl on his son's arm, though of course none of it showed on his face. "Will you introduce me to your friends? This is Hermione Granger, Padma Patil, and Neville Longbottom. This is my father, Senior Accounts Manager, Barchoke." Hermione paid no notice. Barchoke's classic pinstriped suit, that he was slightly shorter than his son or had pointy ears. Harry called him father, and that was more than good enough for her. The young Ravenclaw immediately offered her hand in greeting, saying, "Pleased to meet you, sir." Padma and Neville took their lead from Hermione and offered the same greeting. Barchoke couldn't remember the last time he'd shaken a witch or wizard's hand. His son had chosen his friends well. "Master Flitwick has arranged for us to lunch together before our meeting with the headmaster. The meeting will now be joined by some of the senior staff too." Harry was well aware it wasn't considered polite to switch to the goblin language in the company of those who didn't understand it. He was also aware certain situations called for it. He considered this one of those situations. "Father, can my friends join us for lunch? I feel they really need to know important information about me." This caught Barchoke on the hop. His son hadn't been gone a week yet, wanted to tell these friends his secret. He was delighted. His son had a best friend. That she was Muggle-born was in many ways a bonus. That was a side of the world that he was ill-equipped to teach his son anything about, but this was moving way too fast. "Are you sure about this, Harry? Once told, you can't take it back." Harry nodded determinedly. "The girls were almost killed yesterday. I was forced to slay a troll that was trying to bludgeon them to death." Barchoke's mask slipped at that. He practically growled at Harry's head of house. "You shall be explaining that to me later, and why I was not contacted immediately." Hermione had been surprised when Harry started speaking what she could only guess was the goblin language. That was nothing, though, to watching his father's public face slip for a second. She remembered Harry telling her his father had fought 2 duels to the death to protect him. She now had no problem believing that public face back fully in place. He then switched effortlessly to English. "Harry has asked that his friends join us for lunch. I would be delighted with that. I certainly want to know more about his friends, and especially what happened yesterday." The goblin's last phrase was said in a harder tone, and specifically aimed at McGonagall. Minerva quickly responded, "Sir, I'll be more than happy to answer any and all questions you may have at the meeting. I'm hoping you may answer some of mine." The concerned father gave a slight nod at that. "I hope we can cooperate, but please be assured the safety of my son will always be paramount in any discussions we have. I was not aware that fighting trolls was actually part of the Hogwarts curriculum. If this is the best your school has to offer, it will be a short meeting and my son will be returning home with me." Harry felt Hermione's fingers dig into his arm. At that he placed his hand over hers to offer some reassurance. He was pretty sure his father was bluffing. He was also pretty sure he was the only one there who thought so. Harry was certain his father's words would get back to the headmaster before the meeting, which was his father's entire reason for speaking them here. They were led into a room set up for lunch, and Harry invited Master Flitwick to join them, alerting his father that their head of house should be considered an ally in what was to come. Barchoke responded in kind by offering some comfort to the young girl who was clearly building herself up into a state of distress. "Please don't trouble yourself, Miss Granger. Should Harry leave Hogwarts, arrangement would be made to ensure he stayed in contact with his best friend." "Oh, thank you, sir, but Harry already knows my feelings." "Hermione, before you say any more, there is something I need to tell you. I need to tell all of you." Harry had just sat at the table with Hermione and Padma either side of him. His father now sat opposite and nodded his acceptance of the situation. What I'm about to say may make a difference to where we go from here. You all heard the Sorting Hat call me prophesied one. Well, the prophecy in question concerns me and Voldemort. He's not dead and will be coming after me. It was Flitwick who broke the silence that followed Harry's revelation. Having just had the worst fears of the senior staff confirmed, it was time to declare whose side he was on. This is not for repeating outside this room. Voldemort was in the castle yesterday. He possessed Professor Quirrell and let the troll into the castle. Harry shared a glance with his father before continuing. We didn't think he would be able to stage a return for a few years yet. This is why I just had to tell you. Being around me could be dangerous. Harry found himself confronted by a witch determined to get her point across. Hermione was so determined she was sitting on his lap with her face mere inches from his. You listen to me, Crow, it's taken me nearly 12 years to find a best friend. If you think for 1 second that I'm going to give that up, then the hat was wrong to put you in Ravenclaw. Barchoke now thought his son had made the right decision as he watched Harry's arms snake around the young witch. It was heartwarming to watch as these two drew comfort from each other while the rest of his friends quickly supported him. Padma was in Ravenclaw for all the right reasons, and used that claw reasoning to convey to Harry she wasn't going anywhere. You say I may be in danger if I stay your friend. I say I would be dead if I wasn't. You said it yourself, Harry, you only raced to the infirmary because your friends were there. We all know the professors would have gotten to the infirmary too late to do anything but clean up the mess. I'll take the danger because I think I'm far safer and certainly happier as your friend. Neville was blushing but determined to prove the same hat had put him in Gryffindor for a reason. My reason is more like Hermione's, though without the hugs. It's taken me a long time to make any friends, and that's a lot to give up. Besides, you told me we're practically family. I wouldn't be much of a family if I ran away now. Hermione had such a tight hold of Harry, she could feel the tension leave his body as they all declared they were going nowhere. She sat back, still on his knee, to ask the next question. Okay, that explains all the training and tutors. Now have you anything else to let slip, or can we eat our lunch? I never knew running in the morning could give you such an appetite, and we cut breakfast short. As Miss Granger slipped into her own seat and began eating her lunch, Barchoke lost it. Both Harry's letters home had been full of this young witch, and he had a good idea of just how apprehensive his son was about telling her the prophecy. Seeing her reaction to the news caused Barchoke to burst out laughing. Son, I heartily approve of your friends. Miss Granger, no matter what happens here today, you can rest assured you will be in Harry's life as long as you both want that to be so. The relief amongst the young people was palpable. Now all Barchoke needed was the meeting with the headmaster to go as well. First, though, he wanted to hear how his son had taken out a troll. Albus glanced down at his now unwanted lunch and reckoned losing weight was the least of his troubles. Minerva's news had once more robbed him of his appetite. Are you certain Barchoke was serious about removing Harry from Hogwarts? Felius said the boy was sent here to mingle with his peers. His deputy attempted to get across the seriousness of the situation. When Barchoke heard about yesterday, he appeared ready to behead Felius in the entrance hall. Barchoke may have sent Harry here to mingle with his peers. Having his son forced to kill a troll to save his friends was never part of the deal. The headmaster was a shrewd enough negotiator to know that going into any meeting where the other party held all the cards was not conducive to getting the result you wanted. Albus couldn't think of one single thing he had to bargain with. There was more than that disturbing him, though. Harry had terrified him yesterday. I just can't get past the image of that young boy casually wiping the blood off his sword, using the vest of the troll he'd just killed. He's certainly not what I expected. Pomona just had to comment on that. The first-year timetable sees me teaching Harry more than anyone else. A miniature James Potter he's not. The lad is polite, courteous, and shows no sign of the arrogance that plagued his father at the same age. He is also physically taller and certainly broader than the skinny boy an 11-year-old James was. He's already attracting the attention of witches a few years older than him. Minerva had to chip in her 2 nuts worth into the pot too. I saw the pair greet one another before heading off to lunch. Don't doubt for a second that there is not a very close father-son relationship present between Harry and Barchoke. I'm starting to think that Dursley did the right thing by taking the child to Gringotts." This drew some looks of disbelief from her colleagues. Minerva, though, was not for changing her opinion. "I watched those muggles for a full day and protested against Harry being left there in the first place. The fact that they gave the child away proves I was right. It would seem to be pure luck that Harry appears to have been raised in a nourishing environment." An upset potions professor put his knife and fork down. "You seem determined to deny me the same nourishment. All this talk about that brat is ruining my appetite again." Severus's sarcasm valve was stuck on fully open. He was not having a good Friday. "I intend to complain to the Board of Governors about the alternative potions class that took place this morning." He wasn't given time to properly get into his rant as Minerva cut him off with a question. "On what grounds do you intend to complain?" Severus was staring at the deputy as if she had just asked the stupidest question he'd ever heard. "Are you serious, Minerva? Potions being taught inside Hogwarts by a goblin, the board will never allow that. It's degrading to the rest of the staff." Again Minerva jumped all over him. "I am reliably informed that Master Pitsley is the premier potions master of the Goblin Nation. After observing him teach a class this morning, I am confident the students he teaches will be at the very least on par with the best that your class produces." From the pained expression on his face, you could be forgiven for thinking Severus had a fishbone lodged in his throat. His mouth was open and moving, but no decipherable sound was coming out. You also need to take into account that Augusta Longbottom is a very influential member of that board, and her grandson is one of Pitsley's students. Did I mention Hogwarts' latest tutor hopes to be finished the first-year curriculum before Christmas? To Severus, here was proof that this goblin had no idea what he was taking on. Good luck with that. Weasley just managed to melt the first cauldron of the year. I fear it won't be his last, as following simple instructions appears beyond him. The only reason he's not spending the evening in detention with me is because he apparently has a prior detention with you. Since Severus decided to bring up one of her cubs at lunch, Minerva thought some retaliation should be on the menu. The head of Gryffindor knew just how to tweak his large nose some more. "Mr. Crow has obviously been having private potions tuition for a while now. Pitsley has him brewing the witch-sharpening potion next week. If I'm not mistaken, that's usually done near the end of fourth year." That was all it took to see the potion master's napkin hit the table. The very thought of James Potter's offspring as a potions protégé was enough to see Severus heading back to his dungeon. Dumbledore was only partially paying attention to what was happening between three of his heads of house. Most of the headmaster's attention was still on what to do at the meeting after lunch. This had the potential to be bad. Harry, whatever he wanted to call himself, leaving Hogwarts would be a disaster. Phileas led the father and son to the headmaster's office and handled all the introductions. Barchoke sat with Harry beside him, waiting to see what happened here. Dumbledore had requested this meeting before the troll incident took place, so the first move was his. Albus was left really with only one choice. When your opponent held the stronger hand, your options were either bluff or fold. Folding was not an option here, so bluff it was. On behalf of the Witches and Wizards of Britain, I would like to offer our sincere thanks for doing such a superb job of raising young Harry here. I feel it's time, though, that Harry Potter returned to the Magical Society, and asked you here today to discuss if we can reach some sort of agreement on how this could be achieved. I'm sorry, Headmaster, that's just not possible. Oh, come now, Barchoke, of course it's possible. I've been holding back the press and the ministry from interfering, but I don't know for how much longer I'll be able to manage that. The answer Albus got was as unexpected as the source it came from. The anger and venom in the voice of one so young was certainly disturbing, but the information given out was what really startled the headmaster. Bring it on, Dumbledore. I'm sure the press and the ministry would like to know how I was dumped on a Muggle doorstep. A letter tucked in my blanket and Voldemort's Horcrux in my head. A really stellar decision from the leader of the Light that night, a decision he had no legal right to make. Pomona couldn't miss that her three shocked colleagues were turning shades of grey or green. She needed more information. Just what is a Horcrux? Harry's voice was once more respectful as he answered the head of Hufflepuff's question. It's some of the darkest magic known, Professor. To split your soul and store part of it in a separate container requires you to commit murder as part of the ritual. After he killed James and Lily Potter, something strange happened and I ended up with a bit of Voldemort's soul attached to me. This is something Voldemort's obviously deliberately done more than once too, and he can't be truly killed while a part of his soul still survives. My father took me straight to a goblin healer to have the piece in me removed and then destroyed. Why didn't you do that, Headmaster? Minerva was remembering that night as if it was yesterday, because Dumbledore's words had struck a chord with her. She had instinctively known something wasn't right, but had accepted his assurances at face value. Minerva shouted his own words back at Albus. Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can come in handy. That's what you said. Though you never did say what it would be handy for. You knew there was a Horcrux inside that bairn and yet you did nothing about it. I had but a mere suspicion, and I was not aware that a procedure existed to successfully remove a Horcrux from a living host. Usually they would be embedded in an inanimate object that would need to be destroyed. Dumbledore attempted to redirect the anger in the room at a different target than him. What I'm more concerned about here is that an 11-year-old knows about the foulest dark magic imaginable. What kind of a parent are you that would teach a child? Harry was on his feet, ready to defend his father against all comers, when he felt a familiar hand on his shoulder. Remember your training, son. This is why you work so hard. Everyone could see Harry take a deep breath and regain control of his emotions. He sat back down and apologized. Sorry, Father. Losing your temper loses your focus. Losing your focus can cost you the battle. It's hard to sit here, though, and listen to this old fraud berate you when his crimes should have seen him in Azkaban. Barchoke turned his attention to the rest of the company. My son is of course correct. An infant had been hit with the killing curse, yet you didn't even arrange for a healer to check his health. Instead of being cared for, the savior of magical Britain gets taken to the Dursleys by the Hogwarts groundkeeper. I trust Hagrid with my life. From a man with no honor, I'll treat that statement with the contempt it deserves. It also hasn't escaped my notice that you refused to offer a defense as to the illegality of your actions that night. Could that be because they are indefensible? My son is well aware of his past and what the future holds for him. It's clear to me this is information that you also hold, but have chosen not to reveal to even your closest comrades. Dumbledore couldn't believe this was all coming out today. His words to Severus were proving to be true. This boy knew far too much. This information should not be known by mere children. Barchoke growled his question at Dumbledore. Even though a child managed to do what you could not. My son is prophesied to be the only one who can defeat Voldemort, yet you would have him raised by muggles until he was 11. We have to ask the question why. That was one question he had no intention of ever answering. Albus once more attempted to turn the argument back onto the goblin. You are training a human child to be a warrior for the goblin nation. I've heard of nothing but training and lessons. I wanted him to have a normal childhood. Harry just had to butt in at that. How was a normal childhood going to enable me to defeat a dark wizard that's already had the country on its knees once before? The prophecy states you will have a power the Dark Lord knows not. I believe that power to be love. Albus now had everyone in the room staring at him in disbelief. It was left to Harry to come up with a reply. No wonder he was so upset when I killed the troll. The headmaster probably wanted me to give it a hug and make everything all better. Is that what you had planned for my confrontation with Voldemort? Kiss him to death? Sorry, but no chance. I intend my first kiss to be with a girl. Now you're just being silly, Mr. Crow. What? And you were serious with that love dragon crap? I think we've heard all we need to, don't you, Father? There is nothing for us here. Barchoke nodded with pride at his son. Just to address your earlier point, Headmaster, you and I can't do a deal on my son returning to the wizarding community. The reason for my refusal is that the entire issue will be purely Harry's decision. That decision will not be influenced by me, and certainly not by you. Know this, though. Whatever decision he makes, Harry will have my full support and always be my son. A son I'm very proud of. The proud father now had their undivided attention. He'd just announced his son was the only person who could defeat Voldemort, and they were waiting to see if Harry would be staying at Hogwarts. I came here today, at your request, to discuss my son's future. A normal childhood sounds idyllic, until that is it equates to my son being dead before he's out of his teens. Without his lessons and training, neither Harry nor his friends would have made their teens. They would have perished under the club of a troll in the Hogwarts infirmary, all while supposedly in your care. I had hoped we could reach an agreement here today, not on what's best for me or you, Dumbledore, but for Harry. Clearly that is not something you are prepared to do, Headmaster, therefore I will have to look elsewhere. Minerva couldn't decide whether she was going to tear Dumbledore a new one or throw up her lunch and make his robes even more colorful. The deputy headmistress was also having trouble deciding if today's meeting could have went any worse. She desperately wanted to get out of that office but had something that needed to be said first. I shall show you out, sir. The air in here is suddenly tasting rather foul. I feel I must offer my apologies for the small part I played in your son being deposited with the Dursleys. In my defense, I will say I objected strongly to him being left there at all, and the headmaster also waved aside my concerns over young Harry's scar. This was better than Barchoke had hoped for. Here was an opening the goblin intended to exploit. Hogwarts making Harry her champion had really just confirmed what they at Gringotts had already suspected. Harry's future was in some way tied to Hogwarts. Here was his chance to deal with the deputy and exclude the headmaster entirely from those discussions. Now Barchoke could keep Harry in the castle and stick it to Dumbledore's pride at the same time. That was all good to the goblin. I accept your apology and would appreciate the chance to talk with you, Professor. It will give me the opportunity to make arrangements for my son and his friends to also receive private defense lessons. As I just stated, I have no faith in the headmaster or his decisions. I doubt if he will be able to find a competent replacement for the one that was possessed by Voldemort. Albus wanted to demand to know how they had obtained that information, but was too relieved at learning that Harry obviously wasn't leaving the school to complain. Barchoke, though, had a parting comment for the headmaster. With regard to your threat of the press or ministry, my son was 100% correct. Bring it on, Dumbledore. It should be obvious by now that we, unlike you, have nothing to hide. I will agree that Voldemort making Horcruxes is not something we want on the front page of the Prophet, or bandied about the ministry. The goblin didn't want Dumbledore to think he agreed with anything else the old wizard was up to. His last comment ensured that message came across. On the other hand, you are no longer a young wizard. What would happen if you should pass away and no one else had access to the information you fanatically hold to yourself? Do you even have a contingency plan in place, or are you so conceited as to think only you could possibly achieve what needs to be done? This was all Barchoke intended to say on the matter. McGonagall then left with the father and son, both she and Barchoke now turning their attention to arranging a defense tutor for the Mondays and Thursdays that the first-year Ravenclaws were timetabled for that subject. Filius could hardly contain himself long enough to let Minerva lead them out. They could barely have made the bottom of the staircase before he rounded on Dumbledore. After all my warnings, you tried to bully Barchoke into relinquishing his son. There was disbelief in Filius' tone, but anger was easily the dominant emotion detectable in his voice. If that didn't convince me you were at the very least delusional, your power of love comment certainly did. I believe Barchoke when he said he came to Hogwarts today to see if there was any way he could work with you to help his son, both just left here knowing that to be impossible. That boy has by any standard already led an extraordinary life. He's not yours to do with as you please. Dumbledore was getting fed up with people thinking they could speak to him whatever way they wanted. Don't overstep the mark here, Filius. Remember, you work for me. Actually, I work for Hogwarts. Please let me know by the end of the day if you want to take any action that changes that status. I've just heard of a defense tuition position becoming available that greatly interests me. I can also guarantee the lessons would not be held in Hogwarts. Barchoke would have Harry following me right out the door. Filius left behind a clearly angry Dumbledore as he stormed from the office. Pomona attempted to make Albus see sense regarding this matter. The lad will now be receiving private tuition for 2 of his subjects, potions and defense. Add to that, Minerva will need to figure out exactly how he performs his transfiguration before she can be of any help, and you've just pissed off the lad's head of house and charms professor. Albus, you're hanging on to Mr. Crow by the skin of your teeth. She had a wry smile at her next observation. I doubt I could get anyone to bet against what will happen the first time Binns mentions Goblin Rebellion. Can you even doubt there will be a private history tutor on their way to Hogwarts too? That class might just have all 4 houses clamoring to join. Albus knew all this. It was also only a matter of time before the press and the ministry were crawling all over this situation as well. Pomona then tried a different tact. I've known you for over 2 decades, Albus, so my position on this matter should not be a surprise to you. On the one hand, I have a wizard who clearly doesn't trust me yet expects instant obedience to his somewhat questionable actions. Of all the staff in Hogwarts, the only person you have shown a modicum of trust in is the most sour, spiteful and petty man it has ever been my displeasure to teach alongside. Do I need a dark mark on my arm and claim repentance before you decide I might be allowed to know anything of importance? She could see her barbs were hitting their target, so Pomona continued. On the other hand, a goblin I've just met trusted me with information that could rock our world. He did this clearly in an attempt to gain my support for his son. Since that same boy is the one prophesied to fight Voldemort, then you must know he already has mine. I could never support a Dark Lord, so my position on this is crystal clear. I will do everything in my power to help Mr. Crow achieve the result we all want. Minerva and Felius will certainly reach the same conclusion that I have. We just can't understand why you are not standing squarely beside us. His half-moon glasses were currently lying on his desk, while Albus tiredly rubbed his eyes. Of course I want to see the end of Voldemort, but the issue is not as black and white as it's being painted. Prophecies are at best vague, being fully understood only after their completion. The actual prophecy doesn't say who will win, only that one must kill the other. Watching that young boy so casually taking a life terrifies me more than I can say. The last thing we need is for one Dark Lord to be defeated, only to be replaced by another, this one with full Gringotts backing and a goblin agenda. Pomona wasn't standing for that analogy. If my choice is between Voldemort or a young man who calls a goblin father and has a muggle-born witch for a best friend, again, not a difficult decision for me. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts. Albus and mine are all screaming at me to help that boy any way I can. 10 years ago, we miraculously escaped the dark alternative. I never want to go back down that road again. Do you honestly think that child can defeat Voldemort? He did it before Albus, and that was without a sword. Hogwarts obviously knew about the prophecy and still made Harry her champion. If you can't trust Hogwarts, then I'm afraid there really is no hope for you. That's not to say the boy won't need all the help he can get, and you could probably help him more than most. Take a long look in the mirror, Albus, and then decide if you can live with yourself if you don't support Harry. Pomona left the old wizard to his thoughts. Albus was sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. Ron Weasley had a scrubbing brush in his hands, cleaning out a boy's toilet. The brush was certainly a more effective tool than his now held together with speller-tape wand. Long before he boarded the Hogwarts Express, the youngest Weasley male was well aware that the boy who lived would be in the same Hogwarts year as him. Ron had been certain they would both be in Gryffindor together, and surely best friends before Halloween. The strong smell of disinfectant seemed to emphasize that, like everything else in his life, even his dreams turned to shit. His only meager crumb of comfort was that this detention got him out of one with Snape. Potions today had been a nightmare, and Ron couldn't see that improving any time soon. Having to listen during dinner while Neville prattled to Parvati about just how good his potions lesson had been almost gave Ron indigestion. The part about no homework was the clincher, though. Something had to be done. He'd tried to charm his way into the boy who lived's good graces. Ron had been very firmly and publicly rejected. It was time to try more devious methods, namely his twin brothers, with a broken wand, 2 weeks' worth of detention and losing Gryffindor 50 points. Family honor needed to be defended here. Ron was positive he could spin the story to get his brothers unleashing a prank war against a certain first year. That should see Ron getting what he wanted before he called off the twins. An invitation to join the very exclusive club that was Potions Nirvana. No homework and no Snape. Hermione had actually enjoyed her run this morning, especially after getting confirmation Harry wasn't leaving Hogwarts just yet. They were heading down to breakfast and Padma was teasing her that she may join them for morning exercises. It was actually quite cute to see just how clueless Harry was as he mistook Padma's teasing about Hermione being alone with him for genuine interest in their morning exercises. Their friend had quietly confided in Hermione last night that no pure-blood witch or wizard would ever run for pleasure. Apparently the concepts of keeping fit or jogging hadn't quite taken off in the magical community. All three were looking forward to doing some exploring after breakfast, since this was the start of their first weekend inside Hogwarts. The trio had just taken what was quickly becoming their normal seats when a ghostly head came through the wooden table. "Good morning to you, young champion. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, the Gryffindor house ghost. I'm afraid some of my students arranged for your breakfast to be tainted, so I wouldn't recommend eating anything at the moment." All three quickly pushed the food away from them as Harry questioned the ghost. "Sir Nicholas, can you tell me who did this?" "Oh, the Weasley twins are notorious pranksters, beginning to rival even your father and his friends." Their conversation was interrupted there by loud laughter emanating from the Gryffindor table. One glance was all Harry needed before the three of them headed straight over there. Neville was currently sporting a large pair of donkey ears and was braying every time he attempted to speak. Ron Weasley was laughing the loudest, certainly not an attractive sight since his mouth was full of food at the time. "Hey, Neville, someone made an ass out of you." He then proceeded to laugh even louder at his own joke. Harry wasn't laughing. He was furious. As Hermione and Padma took Neville with them to sit at the Ravenclaw table, he headed straight for the headmaster. "Sir, what action are you going to take against this bullying of a first year?" Albus was beginning to think the fates hated him. Why couldn't he be allowed to eat a meal in peace? "Bullying, Mr. Crow. I think you are mistaken. This was merely a simple prank, something I can assure you that your father was very fond of." "You must be mistaken, sir. Goblins don't believe in pranks. They would look on that as an attack on their person, and react accordingly. Since it was only receiving a warning that stopped me also being a victim, I would still like to know what action you are going to take over this unprovoked attack." Severus couldn't take any more of this arrogant boy. "Go back to your table and mind your manners. This is the way young witches and wizards behave inside Hogwarts. If you are so determined to be a goblin, go back to Gringotts where you obviously belong." Snape's mention of Gringotts reminded Harry of yesterday, and of his training. Now would not be a good time to lose his temper. A different approach was needed here. Harry gave a mocking bow before replying. "Thank you for explaining that to me, sir. There is no mention of this pranking phenomenon in either Hogwarts A History or the Student's Handbook. I do not need nor want special treatment, and shall just have to do my best to fit in." Harry walked back to his place at the Ravenclaw table and picked up his knife and fork. "Harry, what are you doing? Eating that will see you turn the same as Neville." Harry made sure everyone could hear his answer. "You heard the Professor, Hermione. This is the way we're supposed to behave. Just because we think this is nothing but juvenile bullying doesn't matter. Why should we be treated any different from everyone else?" She wasn't sure what he was up to until spotting Harry's slight wink. Even though she thought he was nuts, Hermione began eating her breakfast too. As this had now gotten everyone's attention, they all saw Padma join them in breaking their fast. When there were 4 pranked students sitting at the Ravenclaw table, Ron Weasley's laughter reverberated around the hall. "Told you he was an idiot. Imagine eating food you knew was pranked." Ron was interrupted by the head of Hufflepuff. 10 points each to Mr. Crow, Miss Granger and Miss Padma Patil for displaying not only courage, but loyalty to a friend. Minerva was right behind Pomona, though she was reprimanding one of her cubs. "Mr. Weasley, stop braying like a donkey. This isn't a farmyard, so please learn some table manners, otherwise you may find yourself with a trough instead of a plate." These announcements brought widespread applause and saw Harry stand and bow toward both professors, his long ears well worth the price of what he now saw. His head of house must have erected some kind of privacy shield, because Master Flitwick was clearly shouting at an angry Snape, yet there was no sound. It was a big-eared but satisfied Ravenclaw who now sat back down to finish his breakfast. The four friends went for a walk outside the castle while waiting on the prank wearing off. Their ears were only just beginning their journey back to normal when they were approached by a pair of identical redheads. "Really well done this morning, people. You managed to reverse the prank back on us." "Yeah, everyone knew who was to blame, so we've been getting sniggered at since." "Clever way to get most of the hall on your side. That's never happened to us before." Harry was pleased to discover that his voice was now back to normal. "You know, of course, that was only the beginning. Goblin honor dictates that I retaliate against you and your brother. We've never met before, so it must have been him that put you up to this. Big mistake, guys. What do you make of this, George?" "Yeah. Little Thirsty kills one troll to save a few lives, and suddenly thinks he's ready to take on the infamous Weasley twins. Don't know what things are coming to? Youngsters today, no respect for their elders?" The one apparently called George became serious for a moment. "Why the hostility toward Ron? If you had to sit beside him at mealtimes, we could perhaps understand." Harry found himself liking these two, even if they were related to Ron. They both oozed the personality and charm that was sadly lacking in their younger sibling. "Your brother tried to barge his way into our group. When that didn't work, he reached for his wand and fired a curse at Hermione. He couldn't even do that right though and hit Padma instead. That's why the girls were in the infirmary when that troll attacked." The twins shared a nervous glance. "That's not exactly the story he told us." Hermione huffed at that news. "Why am I not surprised? Your brother is a jackass, yet we all end up with the matching mule ears at breakfast." "I'm with Harry for a little payback." Both twins laugh at this. "Looks like we've got some competition in the pranking stakes. We'll have to watch our food from now on." "Oh, slipping someone a potion is so old school. We four intend to be a little more imaginative than that." This had the twins laughing again at the audacity of these first years. "Young Harrykins, you've got some nerve." "Yes, George and I look forward to seeing just what you and your mini marauders can do. Just remember the prankster's motto, don't get caught." They walked away, leaving the other three all staring at Harry. Padma was first to crack. "You have a plan, right? Even the older Ravenclaws don't mess with the Weasley twins, and apparently for very good reason." "Relax, Padma, we'll just have to unleash our secret weapons on them. Ron, his twin brothers, and not forgetting Snape." This made Neville even more nervous. Harry, I'm actually in favor of forgetting all about Snape. If I never have to see him again, it will still be too soon." Padma quickly agreed with Neville, but something Harry had said got Hermione thinking. "Wait until we hear what these secret weapons of Harry's are first before we all start panicking." This earned the witch a smile from her best friend, before he then let them into his ideas. "Well, our first secret weapon is Neville. He's our inside man for Gryffindor House and Weasley payback. Next, I happen to have some recipes for goblin potions that will see Snape sneering out the other side of his face." Neville was shocked at his friends depending on him. This had never happened before. "What do you need me to do?" Harry could see Neville was practically shaking with fright, but determined to do his best. He quickly reassured the Gryffindor. "All we need is information. Neville, until we know more about them, we won't be able to figure out the best way to get back at the Weasleys. If we were to slip the twins a potion, the entire thing would just escalate. I want to put a stop to this, not make it worse." They sat beside the Black Lake in the weak September sunshine, throwing ideas in and out of their grand plan. Scheming revenge against those who have wronged you was certainly a pastime worthy of any goblin. It was only when Harry announced what his other secret weapon was, though, that his friends started to believe they could actually pull this off. Something was certainly off with Fred and George as they entered the Gryffindor common room through the portrait hole. Later that evening. "Detention with Filch. I can't believe we got caught." "That's the least of our worries, Fred. The maps stopped working and none of the secret passages would open for us. How are we going to cope without access to the kitchens? The only portrait working for us is the fat lady." "Yeah, and even she didn't seem too happy to be opening for us. What is going on?" George nudged his twin, drawing his attention to the first year sitting holding a book up to hide his face. It was hard to miss that this first year was struggling to hold his laughter, and that was more than enough to raise the twins' suspicions. "Good book there, Neville. Or were you finding something else funny?" That was too much for the young wizard. The laughter he'd been holding back burst forth. "Are you getting a bad feeling about this, George?" "Oh yes, brother of mine. Could it be that the mini-marauders have struck back?" It was a clearly thoughtful Fred Weasley who answered his twin's question. "The timing would suggest that I have no idea how they could be involved." Between his bouts of laughter, Neville was able to give them a clue. "Hogwarts doesn't like that you decided to prank her champion. The castle is now closed to you." The horrified look on the twins' faces set Neville's laughter off again. "Little Harrykins wouldn't do that to us. We have stuff hidden all through the castle, and now we can't get at any of it." Both sank onto a sofa as the reality of what Hogwarts working against them meant. The ghosts told Filch what we were up to. And the portraits led him straight to us. "We're going to get away with nothing." Neville was still chuckling to himself as he made his way up to the dorm. He couldn't wait to tell his friends what had just happened and to see the next part unfold at breakfast tomorrow. Breakfast was Ron's favorite part of the day, closely followed by lunch and dinner. He was unaware that was all about to change. He was just contemplating what to grab for his first course of second helpings when his plate disappeared. Hey, I wasn't finished with that. This, though, was only the tip of the iceberg. As Ron reached for more food, the serving platters would disappear before he could get his hands on them, only to reappear once he'd moved back out of range. The guile, effort and determination shown by the boy as he continually attempted to stalk more food was light years away from his lackadaisical performances in all of his classes. Unfortunately, all he had to show for his sterling efforts during the rest of breakfast was providing entertainment value to the other diners. Most of the hall was now laughing at him. It was left to Neville to deliver the coup de grace. It would seem that Hogwarts has taken Professor McGonagall's advice to heart. You eat like a pig, so your plate vanished when the castle thought you had eaten enough. It was slowly beginning to dawn on Ron he'd been pranked, though the rest of the hall had reached that conclusion ages ago. Severus Snape certainly had, and thought this was just more evidence that the Potter boy was his father's son. He had stood there yesterday and said goblins didn't do pranks yet. Pulled one the very next day. The potions professor was certainly not going to miss this opportunity to point out that he was correct to the rest of the senior staff, and that's where the trouble really started. You could have heard a pin drop in the Great Hall as people stopped breathing while they attempted to understand what they'd just heard. All eyes were now glued to the head of Slytherin, who was currently standing at the staff table with both his hands covering his mouth. It didn't help, though, the deep, raucous laughter escaped between his fingers. That the sarcastic and sneering form of Severus Snape actually knew how to laugh was a surprise to all. That he was currently standing performing that feat in the Great Hall was shocking enough to freeze staff and students alike. As Snape's laughter became more uncontrollable, his eyes held no humor in them whatsoever. Those black orbs were focused on the one person in the entire hall who was nonchalantly eating their breakfast. Harry Crow may have the titles of Boy Who Lived, Hogwarts champion and slayer of trolls, but his prank on Snape just elevated him to superstar status amongst his peers. Severus paced up and down the headmaster's office like a caged tiger waiting on feeding time. Since neither he nor Albus were able to directly approach the boy, Filius and Minerva were having to deal with the aftermath of breakfast. Pomona had also invited herself along to Dumbledore's office, not wanting to miss a moment of this. Things had been far too serious lately, and they had all needed a good laugh, especially that perpetual sourpuss Severus. The other two heads of house had barely made it through the doors when the sourpuss was demanding answers. Did he admit to being behind it? What was his punishment? Filius was enjoying himself and made them wait until both he and Minerva were seated comfortably before answering. Mr. Crow did indeed have a hand in what happened this morning. See, I told you. Just like his father, but no one here wants to hear a word against him. What was his punishment? I know Albus won't let the precious little brat be expelled. Minerva didn't know if it was wrong to enjoy this so much, and didn't really care. Mr. Crow pointed out, and we all have to agree with him, that both the headmaster and a head of house told the lad that this was normal Hogwarts student behavior. The entire hall heard you both say that to Mr. Crow at breakfast yesterday. Severus was incensed at this, more so because he couldn't refute that it was true. I never told him it was normal to feed potions to a professor. Phileas couldn't contain his smile as he answered the angry potions master. You never said it wasn't. Pomona, as usual, attempted to be the voice of reason. Both pranks that we saw this morning were rather harmless. The youngest Weasley was merely stopped from eating to excess, and there are far worse things he could have done to a professor than making them laugh out loud. Albus knew he had to intervene here, or words would be said that could not be retracted. I agree with Pomona, the pranks were not only well thought out but relatively harmless. They could easily have taken a more vindictive path. Severus, would you rather have been wearing donkey ears and braying? Minerva had more information for them, though, and could hardly wait to pass it on. There weren't just 2 people pranked inside Hogwarts today. Harry and his friends have taken on the Weasley twins. This silenced everyone. Fred and George Weasley had earned their reputation as the best or worst, depending on your point of view, pranksters in Hogwarts. Their head of house didn't keep the senior staff waiting any longer. The Gryffindor Guardian was quite put out that she's the only portrait in the castle currently allowing the twins entry. The rest not only deny them access, they and the Hogwarts ghosts report any wrongdoing to the staff. Both Fred and George already have detention with Argus tonight. Albus was flabbergasted at that news. The castle is giving Harry that much control over what it does. It was a smiling head of Hufflepuff who answered the headmaster. I told you, Albus, the castle chose Harry as her champion. To work against him could see you ejected from Hogwarts. Severus so wanted to rant and rave some more but was forced to concede the point. With that amount of backing, the brat could have really humiliated him this morning. He still had the occasional nightmare about dangling upside down by his ankle while everyone laughed at his underwear. The very thought of what the brat's father and his friends would have done with such power sent a shiver of dread up and down his spine. Severus recognized a warning being delivered when he saw one. Perhaps it was time to back off this boy. He couldn't help but think perhaps Phileas was right. You should never mess with a goblin. By dinner time, Ron was trying a different approach. Sitting at the Hufflepuff table at lunchtime had made no difference. Second helpings were still denied him. His new master plan should solve that problem. Sitting once more at his own table, it was time to put that plan into action. Ron began grabbing food as normal, but not putting it on his plate. Instead, the roast potatoes found their way into his pocket. Slices of roast beef soon followed, though he did give the gravy a miss. No one was laughing at this. The mere thought of having to eat food that came out of Ron Weasley's pocket was spoiling many an appetite. When the food on the table began to once more start disappearing, it was a disconsolate young Gryffindor who sat there almost in tears, munching on the food he'd managed to fill his pockets with. The twins sought out Harry and Co. directly after dinner. Okay guys, we know when we're outmatched. What will it take to return things to normal? Harry was pleased to see that at least some of this family had sense. 2 things, guys. The first being a public apology to Neville for the prank. This confused the twins so. George asked for some clarification. Just Neville? What about the rest of you guys? Hermione had an answer for them. Well, technically you didn't prank us. We all knew what would happen if we ate the food. Both twins were happy to comply with that condition and were now waiting on the hammer to fall with condition number 2. Padma didn't keep them waiting, but the blow was unexpectedly light. The second condition is that we 4 are excluded from your pranks for the rest of your time at Hogwarts. Fred and George had a quick confab before replying. If we can have a proviso in there about pranks that affect the entire school, then we have a deal. It would be too difficult to leave you 4 out, but we're more than happy never to target you lot again. They could hear the admiration in Fred's voice as he complimented the group. Your prank on Snape was beyond brilliant. No one in their right mind would want to mess with the mini marauders. As they shook hands on it, Hermione had a question. Why did you call us the mini marauders? I've never heard that name before. The marauders were a group of 4 friends that were the greatest pranksters Hogwarts has ever seen. With you being four firsties trying to pull pranks, I thought it was funny. Yeah, George, shows what we know, they out-pranked us. Neville's parents had both attended Hogwarts. It was more in hope than any expectation that he asked the next question. Do you know who the marauders were? Sorry, Neville, all we know of Messrs. Padfoot, Prongs, Mooney and Wormtail is their wonderful pranking legacy. We've not been able to find out anything else about them. Well, that ends my interest in the mini-marauders. The last thing I need is another name. Padma was finding she loved teasing her friends and couldn't resist this opportunity. I don't know, Harry, the thought of a nickname is quite appealing. Hermione seamlessly joined right in. Yes, we could call you something like Budgie. Padma immediately caught where Hermione was coming from and played right along. Oh, that would work. He's so colourful and chirpy. Harry really couldn't be called anything else. You could even claim it's your goblin sense of humour. Hermione then emulated Padma in giggling at Harry's pretend pout. Neville was enjoying the teasing amongst his friends, but let out a sigh at his perceived fate. If we're going with a bird theme, I suppose that means I'm a teat then. Padma was first to spring to his defence. Oh no, Neville, I see you more as a robin, proudly displaying your Gryffindor red and ready to defend your territory. Neville was blushing at that, but had a suggestion of his own to make. Well, I think Padma should be called Dove. We have them at the manor and they have such a sweet and gentle nature. Hermione was smiling at her two now blushing friends. She had a question of her own though. That sounds great. But what about me? Harry, Padma and Neville all spoke as one. Owl. It was left to Harry to offer up an explanation. Owls are birds associated with wisdom, certainly fitting for you. In goblin mythology, the owl is revered as the goddess of all birds. You really couldn't be anything else. Hermione's blushes now clearly outshone her friends, as the twins had a good laugh at their expense. Okay, scrap the mini-marauders. Messrs. Budgie, Owl, Robin and Dove shall henceforth be known as the Order of the Owls. That had everyone chuckling before Fred got serious. Guys, what has Ron got to do to lift the prank? It's getting embarrassing watching him. Harry suddenly wasn't so forgiving. He deliberately fired that disgusting curse at Hermione. That's going to take at least an apology. Both twins were nodding in agreement with that condition, thinking it more than fair. Harry, though, wasn't finished. My friend Padma is a beautiful young witch. Our entire year group watched as slugs popped out her mouth and ran down her chin. I think nothing less than a public apology is going to do for that. Again, Fred and George thought this was a fitting and fair resolution to the problem. They also knew that their younger brother would never carry it out. Ron could probably be persuaded that mumbling sorry to Hermione in private was the right thing to do, but there was no chance of him doing the whole public thing. Harry, I'm so glad you don't do pranks. Yeah, you would put me and Fred out of business. As I said, guys, goblins don't do pranks. That doesn't mean I won't help Owl, Robin and Dove with any little projects they might have. Both twins groaned before George replied. Harry, only you could class pranking Snape as a little project. Monday morning brought the now usual spectacle of Ron Weasley playing Searching for Seconds. He'd arrived this morning armed with a 4-foot pole with a hook-like appendage fashioned onto the end of it, only to discover that once more Hogwarts was smarter than he was. Yet again the food began disappearing from his extended reach when the magical castle thought he'd eaten enough. Fred and George at least managed to deflect some of the attention away from their younger brother by making a very public apology to Neville. That they performed this task in their own inimitable style was a given. Both were on their knees in front of the younger Gryffindor, seamlessly switching between bowing and apologizing. Forgive us, O great prankster. We knew nothing of your prowess when committing our diabolical deed. Had we but known we were in the presence of pranking royalty, we would never knowingly prank a member of the Order of Elves. Forgive us, mighty one. The twins had timed it to perfection. These were the last legible words to leave either of their mouths before they began braying and grew donkey ears. It took Neville 3 attempts to accept their apology because he was laughing so hard. This was greeted with a round of applause before everyone returned to their breakfast. The hall was in a buoyant mood for a Monday morning. The arrival of the Daily Prophet changed that. The story had finally broken. Boy Who Lives rejects wizarding heritage. If ever a front-page newspaper headline was designed to cause outrage amongst its readers, Harry thought this was it. The article then went on to proclaim its horror, on behalf of their readers of course, that the savior of their world no longer even called himself Harry Potter. Their young hero now answered to the name of Crow. The newspaper then explained how this travesty had occurred. The boy who lived had been raised since that fateful Halloween inside Gringotts by the Goblins. The Prophet had no answers to offer its readers as to how these unprecedented circumstances had evolved. Just question after question they were demanding answers to. Why had the Ministry of Magic stood back and allowed this abnormality to happen to their favored son? Albus Dumbledore had claimed for 10 years that Harry Potter was safe and well. Did he know the child was living with the goblins, and what part did he play in that despicable decision? The story then descended into hearsay about Harry's first week inside Hogwarts, a few facts stitched together to push whatever agenda the paper wanted. They correctly identified that Harry had been sorted into Ravenclaw, though glossed over the whole Hogwarts champion thing. Their preference was clearly to concentrate on how he had apparently deliberately spurned advances from children of prominent wizarding families. The troll incident was certainly covered, though again only the fact that Harry killed it with a goblin blade was considered worth the mentioning. The paper certainly generated the reaction they wanted from Harry's best friend, but Hermione's outrage wasn't focused where the Prophet would expect. This is utter rubbish. Can they get away with printing this? Padma was also shaking her head. Oh, you obviously haven't read the best bit yet. Hermione, the paragraph near the end where it calls on all the young witches of Hogwarts to show Harry the benefits of rejoining Wizarding Society. As an extra incentive, it points out that the lucky young witch who lands the famous wizard would one day be incredibly wealthy, and Lady Potter. Hermione could hardly breathe as she turned to Harry for some sort of confirmation. The young witch wasn't sure just what she wanted him to say. Harry could only go with the truth. The head of the Potter family will become Lord Potter and be wealthy enough to make the Malfoys appear paupers. Not that they would ever flaunt their wealth. Things like that are only done by people trying to impress. Hermione sat there with her mouth open. The best friend who she'd been crushing on since laying eyes on him was some multi-millionaire lord, and one that every girl in the school would now be chasing after. Harry could see what was happening and decided to put a stop to it at once. He stood and offered Hermione his hand. "My lady." Hermione's eyes nearly popped out of her head at the double meaning now contained in those words. She took his hand to stand and was soon in her usual position, on Harry's arm. "You said yourself, Hermione, the whole thing is utter rubbish. I'm still Harry, and still your best friend." Hermione held on to his arm with both hands and rested her head on Harry's shoulder in relief as they made their way out the hall. Hermione was so overcome with relief, she didn't care that every pair of female eyes were now on them, far less what kind of statement they were making. She was on Harry's arm and the world was once more fantastic in Hermione Granger's opinion. Padma and Neville soon joined them, as did the rest of the first years, who were all heading for the greenhouses. Draco was also smiling, though for a far different reason. His father had cautioned him to sit back and observe, sending home any information he discovered. The head of the Malfoy family had decided he would wait until the story publicly broke before making his move, figuring that he would have more opportunities of manipulating things the way he wanted then. After seeing today's Prophet, Draco knew his father would shortly be bound for Hogwarts. Albus was also expecting visitors after reading how the Prophet chose to break the news. Cornelius would soon be making his way to the castle, and the headmaster didn't really know how he was going to deal with the problem. Nothing in all his years had prepared him for a situation like the one he now found himself in. Albus was going to have to play the entire thing on the fly. He couldn't remember when he'd last had to do that either. Ron Weasley was the only first year not heading to herbology, rather the Gryffindor set off toward the owlery. Ron thought his mealtime problems were far more important than any class about stupid plants. His twin brothers had told Ron what was expected of him to end this torture. He knew within himself that was never going to happen, so it was time to call for reinforcements. Ron decided this time there would be no messing about. He was going straight to the top. It was time his mother found out just how much torture her youngest son was being forced to endure inside Hogwarts. Professor Sprout soon had them all working, so there was no time for any comments about today's prophet. Harry was quite happy with that. After the lesson, he overheard the other 3 Ravenclaw first-year boys discussing what they thought was going to happen after lunch. It was now common knowledge that Professor Quirrell had left Hogwarts. Harry thought this might be a good opportunity to start working on those snubbing rumors.
Guys,
My father is arranging a private defense tutor for me. If you want, I can ask them if it's okay to up the numbers a bit. Michael, Anthony and Terry were all keen, but Malfoy had overheard. It was with a superior sneer he addressed Harry, loud enough though to ensure everyone else heard. If you think any proper pureblood witch or wizard would ever stand for a goblin teaching them, you really are as big an idiot as Weasley claims Crow. Padma was quick to jump all over Malfoy at his implied insult. My family were recognized as pureblood witches and wizards while your ancestors were still herding goats in the French mountains. We apparently have different opinions about what constitutes a proper pureblood. Daddy having plenty of money doesn't change the fact it was only a few generations ago that the British branch of the Malfoys were chased out of France with their tails between their legs. Draco was livid and moved threateningly toward Padma, only to find his way blocked by both Neville and Harry. This was Hogwarts' first glimpse of Neville standing up for himself, and it took everyone, including Malfoy, by surprise. Like Padma says, we have a different definition of what a proper pureblood is. While your ancestors were herding those goats, the Longbottoms and Potters were already magical lords in this country. By any definition you care to make, my blood is classed as purer than yours. Padma was standing beside Hermione and couldn't help but whisper to her, "Told you Robin was a good name for Neville." Neville, though, wasn't quite finished yet. If the defense teacher Harry's father provides is half as good as Master Pitsley, then I'll be first in line for that class too. Goblin or not, it's whether they can teach that counts. And even a house elf would have to be better at teaching defense than Quirrell. Neville had effectively cut the legs from under Malfoy, and the blonde Slytherin was let to storm away as the Ravenclaws, Gryffindors, minus a missing Ron Weasley, and the Hufflepuffs all quickly confirmed to Harry they would be delighted if he could arrange for them to join his defense lessons. Malfoy's posse and the rest of the snakes accompanied him as he stormed off. The other Slytherins had been deliberately non-committal though, preferring to take the Slytherin approach and see who could be teaching them first. Tracy, Daphne and Millicent had barely poked their collective heads into the Great Hall when they were doing an about-turn and heading back to ask Harry if they could join the lessons too. Harry was pleasantly surprised and said he intended to include them when he asked the new tutor. When the group of friends reached the Great Hall, the mystery of the girl's sudden change of heart was there for all to see. The wizard standing beside McGonagall was clearly on good terms with the professor as they stood and chatted, while every witch in the castle suddenly wished they were in the deputy headmistress' shoes and talking to the handsome wizard. He was rugged, tanned, and appeared to be in his early 20s. With dark red hair that was shoulder-length and held in a ponytail, the wizard was at least 6 feet tall, and his dragon-hide jacket really emphasized those broad shoulders. As McGonagall led him over toward Harry, they caught a glimpse of a dragon-tooth earring too. Hermione suddenly had a warm and fuzzy feeling deep in her bones. Apart from the color of his hair, this was probably a close approximation of what Harry would mature into at the same age. This had the young witch smiling to herself and holding her best friend's arm even tighter. "Mr. Crow, I would like to introduce you to the last Gryffindor who held the position of Hogwarts head boy, William Weasley." "Hi, Harry. Hope you don't mind if I call you that. I'm a curse-breaker for Gringotts, and Ragnot himself pulled me back from Egypt to tutor you in defense. Once he made me aware of the actual situation here, well, I couldn't really refuse. What Bill wasn't saying was he'd fought this assignment tooth and nail, until told the prophecy. Any complaints about teaching some snot-nosed kid went right out the window after that. His entire argument that raiding tombs was a better use of his hard-won skills just didn't hold water when compared to training the boy prophesied to fight Voldemort. Harry, though, got the message that this person had been trusted with the prophecy. "Pleased to meet you, Sir Harry's fine, and thanks for doing this." I don't know what Hogwarts has arranged as cover for Professor Quirrell, but I said to my classmates I would ask if they could join the class too. Bill's smile had most of the witches in the Great Hall swooning. Harry, for what I'm being paid for this, you call the shots. If you want me to take all the first years, that's fine with me. Harry was just about to ask Professor McGonagall if this would be okay when they were rudely interrupted by the youngest Weasley currently attending Hogwarts rushing into the Great Hall. Bill, this is fantastic. I just wrote to Mum this morning and now you're here. I don't know what the curse on me is, but I'm sure you'll break it. I'm starving to death in Hogwarts. The elder Weasley was embarrassed at this loud and rude interruption during what was effectively his work. Sorry, Ron. I've no idea what you're talking about. I'm at Hogwarts to teach Harry here defense. Ron's expression of betrayal was soon replaced by one of utter rage. That's just not fair. He gets everything. Not this time. Crow eats slugs. His actions had been so unexpected that there was no time for anyone to react, and Harry so close that Ron knew he couldn't miss this time. Unfortunately, his speller-taped wand had other ideas. The speller backfired from his damaged wand, blowing Ron onto his ass. McGonagall was outraged and didn't care who knew it. Mr. Weasley, never in all my years at Hogwarts have I encountered someone as single-mindedly stupid as you. It would seem you didn't learn your lesson the last time you used that curse, so something different will have to be tried. The first slug escaping Ron's mouth halted his head of house's tirade. For the moment, Percy, take your brother to the infirmary. Inform Madame Pomfrey that under no condition is he to leave there before I have another word with him. As Ron was led away, McGonagall had a moment to get her temper back under control. Gryffindor's attacking anyone unprovoked was always going to get her ire up. Doing it twice, with the second time being right in front of her, was going to see Minerva heading for the burrow later. First, though, she had a situation to deal with. Mr. Crow, I really appreciate your suggestion about allowing the rest of first year to attend. It has my blessing since the alternative at the moment is a study period in the library. I can also assure you that the youngest Weasley brother will learn to keep his wand in his pocket, or he will not be in Hogwarts much longer. William, can I suggest you have lunch with the twins and discover what's really going on here? The twins sheepishly approached their eldest brother and head of house, having never seen McGonagall so angry before, not even at them. Sorry, Harry, Ron's always had a wicked temper. We'll bring Bill up to speed on what the problem is here. Neville headed off with them to the Gryffindor table while the Ravenclaw trio sat at their normal spots. It was a smirking Roger who once more dispelled any lingering awkwardness. I'll say this for you, Harry. Things are never dull when you're around. There was real sincerity in Harry's voice as he answered, Roger, you have no idea how much I'm wishing for a couple of dull months. You know the kind of thing. No one firing curses at you, no trolls needing slain and my name not plastered all over the papers. Is that really too much to ask? The older Ravenclaw was now laughing at that. For you, Harry, probably. Cho was still getting teased by her friends over her first attempt to talk to Harry. There was something she really needed to know, though, so risked it again. Harry, do you think your tutor will be teaching any of the other year groups? Harry thought for a moment before replying. I doubt it. Cho. Gringotts curse breakers are some of the most highly trained and specialized workers they have. The bank will certainly have tasks for him the rest of the week. For Mr. Weasley to even gain entry to that program makes him pretty special. I can't believe my father managed to get a cursebreaker as a defense tutor. Trude couldn't hide her disappointment. I can't believe he's a Weasley. None of the rest of them looked like that. One of the seventh-year girls soon put Cho straight. His younger brother Charlie was Gryffindor Quidditch captain, a brilliant seeker and the hottest thing I've ever seen sitting on a broom. Her flushed cheeks left no one in any doubt exactly what she meant by hot. With a comedic sense of timing that had half the Ravenclaw table doing spit takes, Padma couldn't resist commenting. I wonder if Ronald was dropped on his head as a baby. As everyone was laughing, Hermione had a thought. I wonder if the Pratt will be so quick to use that foul curse again after experiencing it firsthand. Padma agreed, but also thought this was a golden opportunity to tease her friend some more. I couldn't help noticing you looked pretty pleased to see our new defense tutor too. Oh, absolutely, partner. Did you see the way the rest of the witches in here reacted? If they're all drooling over Professor Weasley, perhaps they'll leave Harry alone. Hermione's answer may have somewhat shocked Padma, but it brought the first genuine smile to Harry's face since the prophet had been delivered this morning. The same issue of the Wizarding newspaper was lying on Ragnarok's desk, both goblins present having already read it. Well, Barchoke, the game is now afoot. We will soon discover if your son is as profitable an option as we hoped. I have every confidence in him, Director. He will do us proud. He'll need to, otherwise Gringotts could soon find itself embroiled in a war. With respect, Director, we both know without my son's intervention that outcome is inevitable. Should the Dark One return, the Ministry would soon fall to him. His gaze would then turn in our direction, and our kin have fought wars rather than bow to better wizards than that self-proclaimed Lord, Voldemort. A war against we goblins would be used to cement his hold on the magical community. They wouldn't dare oppose him with a goblin rebellion then in progress. I am well aware of this, Barchoke. It was my main reason for accepting your plan for the prophesied child. Unlike you, I can't afford to show any sentiment on Crow's behalf. Despite his tender age, he is a goblin warrior on a mission, and we have to remember that goblins are barred by treaty from directly interfering in the affairs of wizards. If the Ministry should take the view that we have broken that treaty, then there could be a war. Barchoke attempted to sound more confident than he was. That outcome would require the Ministry acknowledging Harry Potter is now a goblin, something they will never do. They are far more likely to attempt to wrestle control of your son away from you. Are you certain that all the loopholes in that scenario are covered? Yes, Director. If things start proceeding in that direction, Harry has the power to close that avenue of attack off permanently. That will be an unfortunate occurrence, but not the disaster the Ministry gaining control of him would be. We've effectively shut Dumbledore out, but then the old wizard's actions were easy to predict. That is exactly my point, Barchoke. It's very difficult to predict what that idiot Fudge will do because it depends on who has the minister's ear at the time. This was what had the father so worried. We hoped to take away the minister's biggest influence next and release the fox amongst the chickens to add more confusion. It sounded good when we planned it. Sitting here while everything is out with my control is not easy. Ragnarok could see the apprehension in the senior accounts manager torment about the child he had raised as his own. You can be proud of your son, Barchoke. We both know he will do his best. Cursebreaker. Wesley's presence is also a welcome boost. There is genuine animosity there between the Wesleys and one of the main antagonists. He should be another asset on site for us. Barchoke knew all this and agreed with everything the director said. He also knew that both of them were left hoping that Harry's best was good enough. He was after all only 11. Albus was finding it hard to believe that an 11-year-old wizard was causing him so much trouble. He currently had the Minister of Magic, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and Lucius Malfoy, a member of the Hogwarts Board of Governors, asking questions that he really had no answers for. Well, no answers that they wanted to hear. The minister demanded to know when Hogwarts began accepting goblins as students. I was denying the boy access to Hogwarts as Harry Crow, but the castle overruled me, making him a Hogwarts champion before passing over the sword of Gryffindor. Cornelius was not impressed with that answer. I find it hard to believe that a stone building could possibly do something like that. The sorting hat was on its usual shelf in the Hogwarts headmaster's office. It wouldn't normally speak between sorting ceremonies, but was quick to spring to the defense of the Hogwarts champion, and I find it hard to believe the boy who used to wet himself every time one of his professors asked him a question ended up Minister of Magic. Tell me, young Cornelius, have you recovered from your little problem? The hat's intervention brought everyone up sharply, though Amelia Bones had a few follow-up questions for Dumbledore. Would the sword of Gryffindor be the goblin blade in question that brought down a troll? While we're on the subject, where did this incident take place? Her niece Susan had written home with some fanciful story that Amelia had dismissed as the infamous Hogwarts rumor mill, working overtime. Cornelius was not renowned as a patient wizard and had recovered from the hat's jibe. His patience was especially stretched due to being bombarded with owls demanding answers. answers the Minister of Magic fully intended to get here today. Enough of this, Dumbledore, I'm a busy man. Let's get the lad up here and see what he's got to say for himself. Albus was loath to admit he couldn't do something, particularly inside Hogwarts. He didn't have any other options, though, but to speak the truth. I'm sorry, Cornelius, I can't do that. For Harry to be in this office, his father must be present too. This is goblin law and there's nothing we can do about it. So, the rumors are true. Albus Dumbledore is barred from Gringotts and persona non grata amongst the goblins. Lucius couldn't quite hide his delight at the humbling of the headmaster. The minister, though, hadn't travelled to Hogwarts only to be denied by a technicality. Can I assume that you can be in a classroom with the boy? With present company, of course. Again, Albus didn't have any other answers or alternatives, so they all ended trooping off down to the defence classroom. Bill had been shocked at the twins' tale of Ron's behaviour. Percy's non-intervention was also a source of puzzlement for the eldest Weasley son. Even taking away the fact that Ron was Percy's younger brother, he was still a Gryffindor prefect. A prefect with specific duties to watch over the first years.
That Fred and George had even begun the process of becoming friends with Harry made Ron's actions all the harder to explain, never mind defend.
Bill also thought that a public apology to the young girl Ron hit with that curse was not only a fair thing to ask, it was the least he could do. He actually thought an apology should have been offered immediately, without Ron needing to be forced into it. One thing his youngest brother did mention that generated a specific cause for Bill's concern was his letter home to their mother. Knowing her as he did, Bill would not be surprised if this resulted in a howler heading in Harry Crow's direction. He would need to visit the burrow after class to head off the disaster that could quickly descend into their mother in a temper wasn't known as someone who would choose their words carefully, rather just loudly yelling the first thing that entered her head. Bill was having to choose his words carefully in front of the class too, as it would appear he'd just made an error. Cursebreaker Weasley, I think you misinterpreted my answer, sir. I know there are curses which no magical shields can block. I was referring to a goblin shield when I answered your question. I'm sorry, Mr. Crow, but those are spells I'm not familiar with. Perhaps you could show us? A smiling Harry stood and removed a metallic disc from his pocket. It easily fitted into the palm of his hand. Until that was he twisted the disc a certain way. Seconds later, Harry had slipped a gleaming metallic shield onto his left forearm. It was oval in shape and went from slightly beyond his fingertips to just past his elbow, being about 18 inches across at its widest point. A self-adjusting strap on his forearm and a grip for his left hand saw it securely anchored without in any way restricting his movement. The rest of the class was suitably impressed. Here was a practical defense method they didn't need to know any spells to use. Draco was already in a foul mood after having to eat his words and attend the defense class. Potter once more in the limelight was not something he was prepared to tolerate. Do you honestly expect us to believe you can stop curses with that bit of tin? It looks like something our house elf would serve sandwiches off. Harry ignored the sniggering being aimed in his direction. This shield is not designed to actually stop curses, rather deflect them away from you. That takes a lot less power and really lengthens the life of the shield. A powerful dark curse would probably shatter it, but the same curse would pass right through a magical shield. This also frees up your other arm, allowing you to fight back at the same time. The wannabe leader of the first years was dismissive of all this and made no attempt to hide his disbelief. Prove it. Harry raised his eyebrow questioningly at their teacher and got a nod of acceptance in return. Stinging hexes. Okay, Mr. Crow. After agreeing, Harry made his way to the front of the class. He withdrew his knife and took up a defensive stance, awaiting the first hex. Bill deliberately aimed his hex at Harry's chest, just above where the lad had positioned his shield. The boy, though, was incredibly fast, moving and deflecting the curse away from him. The high-pitched yell alerted the teacher that the stinging hex had actually hit someone else in the class. Draco now wore a rather pained expression and was currently rubbing his shoulder. Harry glared at him. Was that enough proof, Malfoy, or do we need to go again? Draco knew he couldn't back down. This had now become a challenge. Nothing but a fluke. He aimed right at the shield. Ag. Bill had fired 3 hexes at Harry in quick succession, all at different body parts. Harry had deflected the first one at Malfoy again, dodged the second, but the third one connected with his thigh. Harry, though, didn't cry out, merely bowed in acknowledgement to his teacher's skill. I think Mr. Crowley demonstrated the effectiveness of a physical shield, and some of its restrictions. Bill was sure the lad could have dealt with all 3 hexes he'd fired. Harry, though, appeared willing to take a hit to ensure the first one was deflected back at the Malfoy boy. He decided not to mention this, instead used the hit as a teaching point. A good magical shield would easily have protected Mr. Crow from all 3 curses. Using a combination of both shielding methods should see him better protected in the future. Bill was also thinking the lad would need more extensive lessons in defense than taking the timetabled class with the rest of his yearmates on a Monday and Thursday could provide. He'd obviously had some previous training, and Bill would be making inquiries about all of this on his return to Gringotts. Hogwarts' newest professor was just getting the class back on track about the best methods of defending yourself when their visitors arrived. Albus thought that this would at least be better than having the lad put on the spot in the Great Hall. He well remembered how his own attempt at that had gone. "Excuse us, Professor Weasley, sorry to disrupt your first class, but we require a few words with Mr. Crow." Cornelius spotted the black-haired, bespectacled boy sitting at the front of the class and waded right in. He was, after all, the Minister of Magic and used to getting his own way. "Harry, my boy, you have no idea how distressed I was to discover just how you'd been raised. I'm here today to put a stop to this goblin nonsense, and also see you being cared for by a proper wizarding family. I'm sure we can soon clear up this momentous misunderstanding." The giggling had turned to full-blown laughter at his last comment, causing a puzzled look to replace the minister's confident expression. Sir, my name's Michael, not Harry." This saw the volume of laughter increase, as did the minister's confusion. "Well, if you're not Harry, who is?" Harry stood to face this fool in the green bowler hat. "My name is Harry, though probably not the Harry you're looking for. You see, I have no need of a new family and am certainly not your boy." Lucius was always amazed that, no matter how stupid he thought Fudge was, the man still retained the ability to prove he was even stupider than Lucius believed. Appearances, though, had to be maintained. "Do not speak to the Minister of Magic in that tone, boy. Show some respect for your betters." "My betters would know it is extremely ill-mannered to address someone without introducing yourself first. Something I noticed you didn't bother with either. I would also like to point out that divination isn't an optional subject until 3rd year. How was I supposed to know this was the Minister of Magic? If that ridiculous green hat is some sort of badge of office, then you really need to rethink that image. A sword is way cooler. I am Harry Crow, son of Barchoke, Gringotts' senior accounts manager." Hermione was, of course, sitting in her usual seat, right beside Harry. In the defense classroom, this placed her between Harry and the door. Hermione was left sitting just in front of where Harry was now standing, and the young witch was already twirling her hair due to her mounting anxiety. Her best friend had basically just told off the magical equivalent of the country's prime minister. Both wizards who'd entered with the headmaster appeared flabbergasted, though the lady's eyes were practically twinkling with amusement. "Mr. Crow, my name is Amelia Bones, and I'm head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." Harry bowed to the woman and answered her respectfully. "Well met, Madam Bones. I sincerely hope you're not here to arrest me." Amelia actually broke into a smile at this. "Not at the moment, Mr. Crow. This is Minister Fudge, and the other wizard is Lucius Malfoy." There was an instant change in Harry at this news. He immediately addressed Draco's father. "My apologies, sir. At my goblin school, we were taught classes on Lucius Malfoy. Again, though, only your deeds were examined in great detail, which is why I didn't recognize you." Hermione thought she had seen all of Harry's faces, but here was one the young witch didn't recognize. Harry was practically fawning over Lucius Malfoy, something that went against everything she knew about her best friend. The only explanation that made any sense to Hermione was if Harry was up to something. As the senior Malfoy was lapping up Harry's praise like Pooh Bear slurps honey, she didn't think it would take too long to discover if there was a sting in the tail. "You attended classes about me?" "Certainly, sir. You are required reading for 9-year-old goblins in their economics classes. Dumbledore didn't know Harry near as well as Hermione did, but even he suspected the lad was up to something. Decades of dealing with students playing pranks had given the headmaster almost a sixth sense about these things. Albus decided he wanted to know more, and at this particular time, anything that diverted attention away from him was a good thing in his book. What did these lessons consist of, Mr. Crow? Oh, it's a well-known fact that the Malfoy family donates generously to lots of charities and good causes. It's also well known that those donations generally go to organizations where either Mr. Malfoy or his wife are in some way connected with the charity or cause, which is why they're on so many committees and boards. This was not something Lucius tended to broadcast, but wasn't too bothered about those facts being revealed here. The boy was certainly correct. Those in the know recognized the benefits of having a Malfoy on their decision-making panel. Harry, though, wasn't finished. In fact, he was just getting started. This is where the real genius of this economic scheme begins. You see, either Mr. Malfoy or his wife then insist their charitable donation is handled by a specific consultancy firm. Scorpius Enterprises, a responsible thing to do, you might say, until you discover just who owns and runs Scorpius Enterprises, Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy. Lucius's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper now. How did you know that, boy? Harry, though, was unperturbed. Hermione now recognized this face. It was a face that told Hermione her best friend considered Lucius Malfoy an enemy. It was also a face she hoped was never directed at her. Now, scooping a good portion of that charitable donation back into your own vault could be forgiven if that was all the Malfoys were up to. Fraudulently refilling their vaults is not even the tip of the iceberg. They also recommend the people to carry out whatever work gets done or to provide materials needed with what's left of their donation. That these recommendations just happen to be the Malfoys' friends would suggest to me there are switchbacks involved too. A switchback is when money is paid illegally to win a contract to do work. This usually sees a contract awarded to a firm who are never the most economical option, and rarely the best at what they do. Lucius Malfoy was now clearly livid, but it was Amelia who asked Harry the question he was expecting. Mr. Crow, isn't that privileged information the goblins are handing out? Harry was quick to answer. Oh no, Madam Bones. All this information is already available inside the ministry. It just involves different departments, and there is a real lack of communication between them. I really have no idea whether Mr. Malfoy uses his influence to ensure that lack of communication continues, but that is neither here nor there. You see, we were all laughing at how easily Mr. Malfoy could publicly make a large donation to charity, and then privately ensure a large proportion of it ended back in his own vault when our tutor pointed out what was really going on. I think we've heard quite enough of this fantasy. Lucius's growl intimidated no one. Even in full Death Eater regalia, he wouldn't have been able to intimidate Harry into stopping speaking. That both Amelia and Dumbledore clearly wanted to hear more certainly didn't harm Harry's case. Hermione recognized this Harry as the one that took down the troll. He appeared calm on the surface, but she was aware just how quickly he could spring into action. That he was subtly moving so she was no longer directly between him and Malfoy was another clue. She had her wand in her pocket, but for all the training she had, that's where it was going to have to stay. If a fight started, she was grabbing Padme and dragging both of them under the desk. Harry continued as if Lucius hadn't spoken. You see, every single contract of work Scorpius Enterprises awards goes only to those organizations that are owned and run by former Death Eaters. Mr. Malfoy is secretly funding the Death Eater movement in readiness for his master's return. The minister exploded at this. These allegations are preposterous, boy. Lucius Malfoy is an upstanding member of the British magical community, and you know who is dead. Harry cut right across the minister and almost started a riot in the class. Just speaking the name out loud got a reaction. That was until people began to understand what Harry was actually saying. Voldemort is not dead and was here inside Hogwarts last week. The senior staff fought him in the corridor. The headmaster had warned us all not to go near. At least you were right about the most painful death bit awaiting anyone who went there, headmaster. Why do you think Quirrell isn't teaching this class? He was possessed by Voldemort and let that troll into the castle. As a diversion, Professor Quirrell died when the headmaster cast Voldemort out of the castle. Hermione was watching the adults' reactions to these revelations since Harry's eyes never left Lucius Malfoy. At the mention of Voldemort, Lucius was quite green about the gills. The Minister of Magic actually looked like someone who'd just wet themselves, while Madame Bones appeared extremely angry. Thankfully not at Harry. It was Dumbledore's reaction that drew her attention, though. He was focused on Harry as if attempting to see right through her best friend. It was also clear to Hermione that the headmaster wasn't seeing what he wanted. "Harry, how could you possibly know all that? Hogwarts chose me as her champion headmaster. That means she keeps me informed of things the castle thinks I need to know." The Grey Lady passed through the wall to float at Harry's side. "Our champion speaks the truth. My mother helped build Hogwarts to teach all of this country's magical children, not as a plaything for the current headmaster. I give you notice, Albus Dumbledore, the castle will no longer support you dragging her children into danger, but for our champion's swift action, 3 of our youngest would be no more. This is your final warning. Albus Dumbledore, why am I finding out Voldemort is back from an 11-year-old boy?" Hermione quickly changed her opinion. Madame Bones wasn't extremely angry. The witch in question was right royally pissed off. Hermione was even more grateful that anger wasn't directed in Harry's direction. Cornelius was finally stung into action. "That's quite enough, Amelia. All this talk about you-know-who being back stops now. He's not back. He can't be back. You saying that minister doesn't make it true, just like Malfoy here saying he's not a Death Eater doesn't make it true either. I'm warning you for the last time, boy." Harry moved closer to Malfoy. "I'm sure Professor Snape will have some Veritaserum in his department. A few drops would end this argument once and for all. How about a magical oath that you were never willingly a Death Eater? Personally, rolling up your left sleeve would be enough proof for me." Malfoy's control finally snapped and he went for his wand, but since Harry had deliberately provoked the Death Eater, he expected nothing else. Harry's custom-made knife had its point digging into Lucius's chest, directly in line with his beating heart, before the Death Eater could even think about getting a curse off. If you intended to use your wand for a magical oath, go right ahead. Otherwise, try anything and I'm pushing this blade home. We'll all get a chance to see just how pure Malfoy blood is when it's pumping out your chest. There was a short kerfuffle behind which ended with a slap and a yelp. Harry was coming to recognize. "It's only Draco trying to interfere. I slapped him one and now Neville's got him covered." Harry's eyes never left the senior Malfoy, but he was sorry he missed Hermione slapping Draco. "Thanks, Hermione. Nice to know someone has my back." Amelia's wand had Malfoy covered the instant he reached for his. She was delighted to see the young lad had the drop on the arrogant ass. Like Harry, Amelia was certain Lucius Malfoy was a Death Eater, but was powerless to intervene because of his ministerial contacts. She didn't believe a young boy should have to solve their Death Eater problem, but wouldn't lose any sleep if he skewered Malfoy today. Cornelius didn't know whether to shit or swear, but Albus couldn't stand there and see a young man become a murderer, even to rid the world of Lucius Malfoy. "Mr. Crow, I can't allow you to kill him. Had he drawn a wand on me inside Gringotts, Malfoy would already be dead, headmaster. His blonde hair would be streaked with red as his head rolled along the bank's floor." Lucius was frozen to the spot. Draco had written home that this boy had slaughtered a troll with a blade. One glance into those blazing green eyes told him this boy wouldn't hesitate to carry out his threat. The wicked-looking knife currently pressing between his ribs certainly lent credence to his fears. Lucius felt closer to death than at any other time in his life. Dumbledore also recognized Harry was ready and prepared to carry out his threat. "That may be so, but we're not in Gringotts at the moment." "Very true, sir, so please answer me this. What is the punishment for an adult drawing a wand on a student inside Hogwarts? Considering we have the Minister of Magic, Chief Mugwump and head of the DMLE as witnesses, I don't think even Malfoy here could get away with his "I was under the Imperious Curse" lie again. Albus felt every pair of eyes except Harry's on him and hated saying what he had to. I'm sorry, Mr. Crow. The best I can do is have him escorted out of Hogwarts. Hogwarts shall ensure he never sets foot in the castle again, young champion. Thank you, Helena. Do you have any other options for me, Madam Bones? Amelia also hated having to give her answer, but would never shirk her duty. I'm sorry, Mr. Crow. Technically, Malfoy has committed no crime, yet, so the Ministry has left me with the same option his master came up with, letting his curse bounce of me and kill the piece of shit. Now, Minister, perhaps you will understand why I have no intention of ending this goblin nonsense. Tell me, sir, was Malfoy here one of these proper wizarding families you were so desperate to have me raised by? Cornelius appeared to recover some of his bluster after being addressed by the boy who lived. Put that weapon down at once, boy. The only one breaking the law here is you. Harry then heard a welcome voice behind him. I've got your back, Harry. Malfoy moves a muscle and I'll take his head off. This seemed to make up Harry's mind. Thank you, Cursebreaker Weasley. Nice to know there's one adult in this room I can rely on to protect me. Harry's knife flashed as Lucius let out a yell. He was cut from his left shoulder to wrist. The cut wasn't deep, having the sleeve of his robe sliced open was probably more painful to Lucius. You should get Madame Pomfrey to look at that. She won't be able to do anything about your dark mark, though, otherwise Snape would have had his removed years ago. Even with the blood leaking out the wound Harry had just caused, and Lucius dropping his wand to cover the dark mark with his right hand, couldn't totally disguise that disgusting tattoo. Everyone in the room clearly saw it. As they were mesmerized with Malfoy's left forearm, Harry had sheathed his knife and now had Godric's sword in his hand. Goblins value honor and justice above all. No amount of gold can make up for losing either one. The man whose sword this once was epitomized both of those traits, which is why the goblins forged him this magnificent blade. These are values the wizarding community appears to have forgotten. Harry turned his attention back to Malfoy. When your master comes back, tell him I'll be waiting to finish the job. This time that coward and all of his followers will be dealt with. Anyone else? Apart from Albus Dumbledore saying something like that would either be laughed at or rushed to a specialized ward in St. Mungo's. Harry, standing there wielding his magical blade, appeared to radiate an inner power, a power everyone in that classroom could see and even feel. Suddenly the castle naming him as her champion made perfect sense. The Hogwarts champion then addressed the Minister of Magic. My father has already confirmed to Dumbledore that the decision on whether my future lies as a goblin or a wizard is mine, and mine alone to make. I'll tell you something for free, Minister, from where I'm standing at the moment, that's not a hard decision for me to make. The Ministry has no legal or moral grounds to remove me from my father, the person who raised an abandoned toddler when every adult in this room failed me. If you attempt to destroy my life, I will respond as any goblin would, by fighting back with everything that I have. Fudge was about to start shouting when Harry silenced him by the simple act of pointing his sword in the minister's direction. Tell me this, Minister, should the fabled boy who lived leave Hogwarts and return to Gringotts, citing Minister Fudge's interference as my main reason for rejecting Wizarding Society to live the rest of his life as a goblin, what would be the public's reaction? Cornelius Fudge now had a complexion that exactly matched his lime green bowler hat. Thanks to this blonde bastard and his masked buddies, my father is all the family I have left in the world. He's fought 2 duels to the death against goblins who believed a wizard had no place in Goblin Society. Please don't doubt for a second I wouldn't do the same for my father. I am my father's son, Minister, and proud to be so. Harry returned his sword to its scabbard while bowing to Bill. Cursebreaker Weasley, I thank you for your support, and please don't think I counted you as one of those adults who failed an orphaned toddler. Bill returned the bow without taking his eyes or wand off. Malfoy. Harry, I think I was 10 at the time, so no harm done. Please know, though, that this time around I'm old enough and would be honored to stand by your side. Weezers always stand on the side the light, so you can count on my wand in the fight against Voldemort. Harry then bowed to Amelia. Madam, a pleasure meeting you. I know that in any fight against Voldemort, Amelia Bones would be at the heart of that battle. Should you wish to speak again, please arrange it through Professor McGonagall or my head of house. Your honesty and regard for the law are well known within Gringotts, as are the restrictions you are required to work under. I hope what has been learned here today may help with those restrictions." With that, Harry marched out the classroom. Harry's parting words were like an explosion of understanding for a few of the adults in the classroom. Albus and Amelia got it at once, with Bill only a few moments behind. The goblins were barred by treaty from interfering in wizarding affairs, yet were currently sitting on an active volcano, one that was soon due to erupt. They knew Voldemort wasn't dead, and also that his vile organization was sitting ready for his return, yet couldn't do anything with that information. Harry Crow had just laid it out for them on a silver salver, leaving behind a bleeding Malfoy standing there with his dark mark clearly visible, and a minister who was almost catatonic with the thought of his precious public approval rating plunging into minus numbers. Amelia was so impressed she wanted to run after that boy and kiss him for this gift. If the young witch who almost bowled her over following Harry out the door was any indicator, he would soon be getting kissed by someone a lot nearer his own age. Hermione had learned her lesson from the troll debacle. She had no intention of letting Harry have time to formulate any wrong ideas about this. She quickly grabbed both of their defense stuff and chucked it into his bag before tearing out of there after him. She thought Dumbledore was going to say something about her leaving too, but then the headmaster seemed to change his mind. He would need to have taken his wand out and restrained the determined young witch. Harry needed her, and this time she intended to be there for him. Hogwarts had also learned from the troll incident. Leaving her champion alone for the entire evening was not a mistake. The castle intended to make again. The portraits and the fat friar quickly led Hermione straight to him. She didn't even hesitate when seeing it was a boy's toilet. She burst in and heard retching noises coming from one of the cubicles. Harry was throwing up into one of the toilets when he suddenly felt someone slowly rubbing his back. "It's okay, Harry, I'm here for you." Those words, combined with Hermione's soothing actions, were better than any potion from Madame Pomfrey for settling his nerves and stomach. It still took a couple of minutes for him to be able to answer her, though. "Won't you get into trouble for leaving the class and being in a boys' toilet? I just watched my best friend rip the Minister of Magic a new one, so figured, what the hell, you only live once, so why not throw a little danger in there? And anyway, the fat friar was going to get Moaning Myrtle to stand guard for us. Trust me, no boys will enter this toilet with her there. How did I come across back there? I was hoping for someone who was in control and desperately trying to avoid being considered some psychotic nutter. I thought you were wonderful, but can I ask you something? Just how long have you been planning that?" Harry couldn't help but smile, not surprised that Hermione would see through him and pick up on their scheme. So much for spontaneity, it's overrated anyway. Father and I actually had about 6 plans depending on the circumstances. I couldn't believe my luck at how it played out. Cursebreaker Weasley and Madam Bones were unbelievable bonuses. We needed Malfoy's deeds and Dark Mark made public. He's the linchpin in the Death Eater organization. One of the plans had me slapping Malfoy Sr. and challenging him to a duel. Hermione couldn't hide her horror at that outcome. "Harry, could you beat him in a duel?" "Hermione, I'm 11, he would kick my ass. He let me get close today, which was a big mistake. With a blade I could carve my initials on his forehead before he could say ouch. For a one duel I had intended to sucker him into accepting and then nominate our head of house to fight for my honor. Master Flitwick was a dueling champion on the European circuit, and Dumbledore is probably the only person within a 100-mile radius who could hope to match him. So you had no intention of killing him, that was all a bluff?" Harry looked straight into Hermione's eyes and answered her as honestly as he could. "That was never part of the plan, Hermione, but if he'd tried anything stupid, thanks for taking care of Draco for me." Hermione understood what Harry was saying and accepted it. She'd seen the same thing with the troll. He'd done everything he could to avoid killing the creature, but when that didn't work, Harry thankfully hadn't hesitated. "As to Draco, I don't know what came over me. I just saw him rushing at your back and reacted. He doesn't respond too well to getting walloped in the face. Neville then sat on him and promised more of the same if he didn't behave. Bill ignored the ghost's flirting and headed straight into the toilet indicated by the portraits. Declaring himself for Harry meant the castle was willing to help Bill aid its champion. The sight that greeted Bill warmed the eldest Weasley's heart. The curse breaker was slowly getting used to the reaction of adrenaline leaving your system after being in a life-threatening situation, an occupational hazard in his job. The first few times, though, his actions had mirrored Harry's. He'd never had someone rubbing his back and offering comfort while he threw up. Gringotts' curse breakers didn't go in for much of that touchy-feely stuff. He conjured a glass and then filled it with water. "Here, Harry, drink this." As Harry was drinking, Hermione asked the question they both wanted the answer to. "Sir, what happened after we left?" "Oh, Malfoy demanded I lower my wand or he would see me sacked from Hogwarts. When I explained that I worked for Gringotts and was only in Hogwarts as a tutor for you since Voldemort killed Quirrell, well, you can imagine the uproar that caused. I did advise him to complain to my superiors at the bank. He would probably get me a raise." This got a giggle from Hermione and even Harry smiled. Dumbledore then took the minister up to his office for a pick-me-up. "I don't think he was talking about a lemon drop. You really kicked fudge where it hurts." His public approval rating. I also think Dumbledore was desperate to get away from Amelia Bones before she could ask any more questions. She had her sights on someone else, though. As soon as the minister left, Lucius was invited to accompany her to the ministry. Bill was smiling at the next bit. Apparently some new evidence has just been revealed that casts doubt on his claims not to be a Death Eater. She did promise to return. I got the impression she wanted to speak with you and then rip Dumbledore's head off. This had both Harry and Hermione smiling too, but Bill had more to say. "Harry, what you did in there today was brave, bold and bloody brilliant. I left Hogwarts and went straight to work for Gringotts, so I have more than a fair idea of what really went on in that classroom. I take it from Miss Granger's expression that she is aware of the situation too. My friends needed to know what they were getting into. I told them when we all had lunch with my father last week. The senior staff are also aware of the situation, though Dumbledore and Snape are not trusted by Gringotts." Bill was nodding, having already been made aware of some of that. "What I was going to say was that your current defense lessons are fine for getting to know your classmates, but you need more." Hermione couldn't believe she actually interrupted a teacher, but this needed to be said. "Sir, I sat there today and felt useless. I didn't like it. Harry warned us it might be dangerous to be around him and we all accepted that. What I'm trying to say here is, if there are any extra lessons on how to defend yourself, I so want to be included. I'll bet Padman and Neville will say the same. 4 is a small enough number to work with, so I have no problem with that. Should I take this suggestion to your father?" This certainly got a smile from Harry. "Yes, please. Could you also tell him what happened today? I know he's been really worried about it." "Okay, providing you and your friends get down to dinner. What you did today was brilliant, but now you need to follow through. There's no point of making such an impression only to go and waste it by hiding out in a toilet. Your other 2 friends are waiting outside. Miss Patil won't enter a boys' toilet, and Mr. Longbottom's not yet got the confidence to deal with Myrtle." Hermione helped Harry to his feet and then gave him the hug she couldn't, because of his previous position. He needfully hugged her back before straightening out his clothes and offering Hermione his arm. Harry didn't know if he would be able to eat anything but respected the advice he'd been given. It was time to go down to dinner.